Welcome back to Dialog Choices Podcast. We have Toaster here for a very special episode of Toaster Hates Indigo Park, and only Toaster, and don't get mad at him. It's all his fault. Nobody else has to.
Don't put me on the spot like this.
Don't you put that
This is not a PSA
me.
episode. You can't start by saying it's a very special episode starring Toaster. It's not fair.
Well, Toaster's back. I don't know where Andrew is. He forgot, probably.
Yeah, because it's like early afternoon for you guys. Well, actually, it's still morning for you guys.
It's
sorry.
10:30 a.m.
Time zones are the worst.
But basically, we've been ranting a bit about the furry indie horror Mascot game. It's just a furry game. It's like more furry than Mascot, honestly. It has actual anthro furries running around in it. Indigo Park. We were ranting about it in the background from a quiet frustration, and then I made a thread about it, like, should I talk about this game and how it's actually like kind of really bad, and just like be the one dissenting voice that actually discusses the stuff, because nobody really is. And then those threads got a lot of responses and some very frustrating logic loops and so on, and like very strange reasoning throughout the responses about why it's not fair to say this about a product for some reason. And now we're just hyped up to rant about it even more, I guess.
Yeah. Should we
introduce
discuss
the game, I guess?
Yeah, let's talk about the game and what it is and how I came to it, because it is a weird viral phenomenon that has been like so obviously positioned as a viral thing that I think talking about its virality like is part of the coverage of it, right? And so basically Indigo Park is a 2024 Indigo Park Chapter 1, I should say, is a 2024 Mascot horror game developed by one person as their first game. It is developed by Unique Geese, who is a YouTuber and Twitch streamer, who makes a lot of like gaming variety videos, but also a lot of like reaction content and like streamer-y stuff. It's kind of similar to a lot of the stuff that I do, a lot of the stuff that you would see, like a Pokimane or, you know, whatever people would look to for big Twitch stars. Same vibe. Totally understand what that is. So he decided he wanted to make a Mascot horror game. If you're not familiar with Mascot horror is the kind of form of horror that the term people used to describe like Five Nights at Freddy's, I guess. But the thing is that it doesn't,
where like it doesn't. It's strange because it's not a distinct genre. It's just a theme.
It's
basically,
it's a theme. It's a way to describe flavor text.
It's a thing that you would only describe as a genre in response to the fact that FNAF got so popular that there's like a YouTube-bred young adult / teenage audience that wants more like that forever. And they got used to the fact that FNAF would make a game every like fucking 4 months because they were such quickly churned out little micro projects.
Yes. And I think that's actually really important to the genesis of this, is that Mascot horror as a genre has no real definition besides the fact that it features a specifically iconographic mascot character design approach, and the other primary defining feature is the fact with which it is made often comes from the inspiration of another thing that already exists. Which is not to say that Mascot horror is entirely derivative, but many Mascot horror works exist in direct response to other Mascot horror works. There's Five Nights at Freddy's. The other one that people often bring up is, I think it's called like Ban's Playtime or something. Ban's Preschool
there's
Adventure.
Poppy Playtime and Bam Bam something that looks like, it just looks like garbage. That one looks like absolute garbage.
Yeah.
Poppy's Playtime is some kind of game where you have like two arms that can like shoot forward and grab things, and so that's like an interaction built around that. And Bam Bam looks like somebody learning Blender for the first time made stuff move around a bit.
Yes. And I think with Mascot horror, there is a very big focus on, like, I don't want to say young aesthetics, but like this perspective that, like, this is an unassuming thing that has like a low quality idea up front that somehow belies a twist that implies something deeper. I'm going to be very reductive right now and say that Mascot horror as a genre is the Rugrats is actually Angelica's schizophrenic delusions, the genre.
But that's just a theory.
Yeah.
Career-defining YouTuber's career-defining theory.
Yes, exactly. And that's sort of the premise behind every single Mascot horror thing is you look at it on the surface and it looks like something for children, but actually it's deeper. And that means that a lot of Mascot horror also
Never
is
has
very...
one person had more impact on entire video game genre than MatPat on this genre.
Yes.
Like his videos about FNAF have essentially redefined the identity of the genre, even if that wasn't even what the games were doing.
Yes.
And now to some extent the follow-ups are themselves seemingly responding to his videos about FNAF specifically.
Yes. And it's very interesting because, again, from this perspective, you have to realize that most people who participate in Mascot horror, and perhaps maybe the most defining audience characteristic of Mascot horror, is that Mascot horror fans engage with Mascot horror often outside of the games themselves. Mascot horror takes a lot of influence from chaotic fiction.
It's a fandom genre.
Yes, and dark web horror. So the idea is you play the game and the game is the source text. But then there is a community or an audience perspective that supplements that through the use of things like lore and hidden puzzles and secrets. These are foundational, defining characteristics of the Mascot horror genre. And the reason why I'm talking about this right now is because if we are to talk about Mascot horror as a genre, we need to look at the things that Mascot horror as a genre does to see how Indigo Park interacts with them. So, again, I think Five Nights at Freddy's is a really great example of this. I think I know more people who have a very deep invested interest in Five Nights at Freddy's lore than I have met people who have actually played Five Nights at Freddy's.
I have never played Five Nights at Freddy's, and I know a little bit of the lore myself. So
yeah,
I'm one of those statistics.
Yeah,
and I'm the opposite. I have no fucking clue, but I've played two of them. And then I bounced right off because they're not fun to play.
Yeah, I think that this is interesting, and I think that this is important to how to discuss Mascot horror, though, because the interesting thing about lore and the interesting thing about like dark web fiction, unfiction, chaotic fiction, stuff like these things that Nightmind would make videos about that would get very popular. The sort of funnel for this type of fiction and alternate reality games in general is that they're free. You don't need to play the games to engage with the community. And this is how they go viral. That is a very essential part to a lot of this stuff's success. Five Nights at Freddy's was, of course, very cheap when it was released. So that's awesome. And it makes it so that people can very quickly and onboard into the games if they want to. But the vast majority of the word of mouth around Five Nights at Freddy's did not come from people who were playing the game. It came from people making content about the game, which then spurred other people to look deeper into the game, which created a community around that game that was focused entirely on and around wikis.
On that level, I think that Indigo Park also did something a bit clever or prescient or cynical, depending on how the reasoning behind it, which is that every other Mascot horror that's taken off for a bit has been a bit off topic by comparison in one way, which is that part of what FNAF also did that made it so successful in that way is that it also appealed to a certain other online fandom that will extrapolate characters without actually interacting with the source material to large extents and make it viral and have a crazy reach, and that's furries. And Indigo Park is the most intense furry bait in this entire genre ever. It went so hard on that specific angle to the point where having polished animations of one funny little cartoon character that the internet would care about a lot outside of the game is the only thing that actually works in the game, basically. To the point where it starts to feel cynical when you play the rest of the game and it's so ramshackle. And that it easily could just be because, somebody else does these animations and they're really good at animations and you can just plop them into the video game because that's just a different field entirely. Whereas video game development's super hard and the person making it is fresh out of college and probably just isn't ready to make a game because the game is really bad surrounding Rambly the raccoon. But you took these two audiences that both interact with games largely outside of the games and build up the fan like crazy and immediately start talking about lore, and we'll draw mountains of fan art about these characters and so on. And they're doing all this based on a character that they could get to experience, largely via YouTube videos. It feels very intuitive that a YouTuber would make a game where the most effective part of it is the part that the audience would experience secondhand through videos and not the part that anyone would actually have to play. Because, the game's truly awful, except for the specific part that the audience experiences in roughly the same way as the player, which is watching Rambly on screens.
Yeah. I think the so let's get back to the genesis of this conversation, which is what is Indigo Park, when did it come out, and how is it made, stuff like that. So back to the start. Indigo Park, 2024 Mascot horror game developed by Unique Geese, a YouTuber and Twitch streamer who has never made a video game before. This is his first game. I'm going to front load this by also saying this game has apparently only been in development for a little over a year. Anyone who knows anything about video game design should know that all three of those things are pretty crazy. Making a fully 3D video game as one person is very tough. Making it your first game ever, and releasing it to an audience is very tough. And doing it in basically 12 months is really tough. Indigo Park was released on Steam earlier this month as a completely free game. The title is Indigo Park Chapter 1.
Which is one of the defenses.
This is one of the defenses, and it is very important to frame it as this, which we will probably get into after, because I have other things I want to say before I begin to talk about the framing and positioning of this game, which I think is very cynical. But again, Indigo Park Chapter 1 released completely free on Steam as a full game. It is roughly an hour long, and it ends with a plea saying, hey, if you liked this game, check out our Patreon. We want to do more with this, which is pretty fine. It's a thing that happens. The crazy thing about it is kind of the viral fervor that it has gained, because I feel like this game came out of nowhere. No one knew it was being developed. Then it came out, and now everyone and their mom loves Rambly the raccoon, which is wild. It has already begun to get plushies and other merchandise and things like that. But it's crazy. So the premise of the game
a plushie
is
so quickly that it had to have been planned before the game came out. It wasn't a response to fame. It was a thing you specifically planned from the get-go as your your hype building thing. You seemingly anticipated this whole pattern happening, and the plushie was part of this model. Because I don't think you can just whip out a plushie design in a week and a half.
No, and the company that is doing them for this crowdfunding, typically their process is they send you a thing, and they're like, does this look good? This is a good test doll. Do you want to go through with it? And then you get it rolled up. But anyway, so yeah, Indigo Park. What is the premise? How does it work? Indigo Park is a mascot horror game centered around a abandoned theme park called Indigo Park that is very clearly supposed to be an analog for Walt Disney World Resort. The game's general flavor text and mood is sort of akin to what if Defunct Land did mascot horror, which is kind of a cool concept. Like from the beginning, the game opens with a sort of old-fashioned like archival recording of this game's version of Walt Disney being like, we're opening Indigo Park, and it's very cleverly done historical footage editing. Looks like it's either like a 3D model or like a sort of a deep fake on old real live action footage someone did.
It was a 3D model that just has a lot of heavily video filters to make it look more believable. Yes. I definitely was just staring at his mouth the whole time to the point where I didn't absorb anything he said because it looked so wrong. Like something, I couldn't tell if it was like a fucking morphed video or not. Like all I knew was something was wrong, and I couldn't think about anything else besides that. This part was actually the part of the game that I thought was the most impressive, which was just the fact that he was able to make this, which was a very interesting aesthetic opening to a game. Then it cuts to some people talking over instant messenger at a computer. You know, they have like a Twitch streamer set up. They have their Monster energy drinks, and they're talking about going to visit Indigo Park again to make a video. So the main character is a content creator going to make a YouTube urban exploration video about going to this park. Then the game drops you into the park, and it is a first-person explore 'em up horror game where you walk around and events trigger at you, and then you'll get chased by baddies and things will happen. I feel like that's a fair way of describing the game, just because the type of horror game that just doesn't like have mechanics. Yes. By and large, you just are in hallways and then you leave, and when a thing comes at you, you need to go the other way fast and then until it stops happening. And by no mechanics, I mean like not even the level of mechanics you expect from like 10 years ago non-combat horror games, which had like Outlast has batteries and lockers and like interactions and so on. Like no, like this one's literally like you just run the other way until it stops happening at you moments. So if it's not clear, this is not normally the type of game I personally would cover. I love horror games. I play a lot of them. I play a lot of them on my channel. I would say I'm partially known for survival horror games. And this has been a very good month for horror games. A lot of really great stuff has come out, including Crow Country, a very, very good survival horror game people should spend their fucking money on. So anyway, moving forward, Crow Country came to my purview because I woke up one morning blessed by the thumbnail fairy. Crimson Rabbit put a thumbnail in my Discord. He just said, hey, I made this for you. And he drew me completely bespoke Indigo Park thumbnail as incentive for me to play this game I was otherwise not going to play. Worth it. Yeah, and it was that is part of this. It did end up worth it for me big time, because if I go to my YouTube analytics right now, my Indigo Park video is not only the best video I put out this week in terms of viewership and engagement, it is the best performing video I have ever put on my channel, period. In the course of a week, it has over 75 times the views of my next highest viewed video. Indigo Park Chapter 1, full game, a furry mascot horror game starring a cute raccoon, that is the title of the video, has 26,000 views. My next highest viewed video, let me go to all time. That's World of Horror at one point is
Lifetime.
2.
My next highest viewed video is a 11-second short for pseudo regalia where I die and it's funny. My highest performing Let's Play episode that isn't a short is the first episode of my World of Horror custom modded Sandals Bueller playthrough, and it has 1,200 views. That thumbnail, I would like to also say, also has Crimson Rabbit art.
Yeah, no, your sixth most popular video is also Crimson's art of Who's Leela. Every time Crimson draws you a thumbnail, it's immediately one of your most popular videos.
Yeah, Crimson does just bless me with thumbnail art. The Who's Lila art that he gave me is amazing. That is also very good. That was a fun playthrough as well. But yeah, he just comes into my DMs and says, I made you art. Please play this game. I won't accept payment. You have to play the game. And I go, okay. And then I play the game. So I downloaded Indigo Park. Doesn't cost me a thing. That's great. I go to start playing it, and pretty instantly I start to get a kind of skeptical feeling, because I'm always very sort of cautious when I go to play a game and it immediately begins positioning itself to its audience, speaking only in terms that audience would be aware of or would understand, or is like oddly reflective of that audience, right? And I don't want to use the P word here, but it's kind of pandering. Because again, Indigo Park, it's a mascot horror game, a game designed by streamers for streamers. It's basically what mascot horror is. Immediately is about a content creator, and not just about a content creator, about a content creator who his entire gimmick is like the exact kind of content that goes viral on the internet and has a very massive, constant comfort fan base, like Defunctland or Jenny Nicholson, or, you know, any number of these Disney World I Go to Theme Parks channels. And then you get into the park, and the biggest and most important thing happens. You get introduced to Rambly the raccoon, the game's mascot, who is a in-game AI. He's played by an actual person, written by an actual person. The fact that we have to specify this is stupid. 2D animated.
Because you said the word AI, now people are so set off by that word that they forgot that it meant stuff before a year ago.
Yes. 2D animated purple talking raccoon with the furriest furry design to ever furry.
When I explained that I'm pretty sure that this game doesn't feature AI, like its enemies don't have AI, as far as I could tell, I have expected someone to be like, good, I don't want AI in my video games.
Yeah.
Because of the fucking discourse ruining that term completely.
Yeah. Yeah. So Rambly, and here's the thing. Here is the kicker. Rambly is the best part of this game by and far away. He is a charming, extremely well animated, very well voice acted, cute little mascot character. He's your Atlas in your BioShock. He's your Fontaine. He is there to audio log in your ear as you walk through these environments, and he spits exposition at you and has a cute personality. But he is also, I think, the focal point on which all of this game's problems exist, which is mainly that there's nothing other than Rambly, and there's nothing that Rambly does that really creates this atmosphere of mascot horror that people really want. And this is my first problem with the game. People point at Indigo Park as revitalizing the mascot horror genre and being a good example of mascot horror. But the weirdest thing about it is that, like, I couldn't find any of the characteristics that typically make mascot horror popular in this game at all. There are collectibles that you pick up that have some flavor text on them, and if you click on them, Rambly will tell you more about the items. But in terms of lore, there really isn't much to go off of. I genuinely think that a lot of the people making like game theory videos about Indigo Park are not actually building it off of evidence. They're just making stuff up, which is an already low bar for the way that people engage with quote unquote lore in video games.
It's like how the fans immediately decide that Lloyd and Rambly are ex-lovers.
Yes.
And it's like, that's not in the text anywhere.
Yeah.
You just think that's fun, which is fine, but that's just shipping. That's not even like lore interpretation at that point.
Yes. And that is sort of an ongoing weird thing, is that a lot of the information that you get in Indigo Park is explicitly non-actionable and does not directly point to anything. So the thing that I'm going to use as an example here is like a Five Nights at Freddy's or, like a Bendy and the Ink Machine. You'll be walking around in Bendy and the Ink Machine or Five Nights at Freddy's, and you'll be playing the game, and there will be notes around or lore around or pictures that you can see or characters in the background of a set thing that don't get any attention. There's no attention drawn to them. But there is also a story happening in the game at that moment, right? And those little details will add up or point to other things. Like you'll be in a back room in Bendy and the Ink Machine, and you'll see, next to a cutout of Bendy, like a pile of documents, and you have to read the documents, and it tells a cute little story. But then in the other side of the room, in the trash can, there's a document that says like canceled plans for animatronic revival. And it's like, okay, using that piece of information, a document that was in a trash can that gave us indication about like animatronics, we can now make the informed leap that the studio was testing something, that they then canceled the project, but maybe, as evidenced by what we have seen in the game, that project has continued illicitly. That is how you create these lore trailheads. That's how they're referred to in like chaotic fiction or unfiction, right? That's the backbone of what people go to the Wikipedia articles to find. Indigo Park, on the other hand, gives you a bunch of collectibles, the only interactable objects in the game other than the things you need to touch to directly progress. And the collectibles are like, I remember when the park originally opened, Lloyd was in a lot more videos, but now he's not. I wonder why Rambly doesn't like Lloyd. And part of the reason why I think this is really poor storytelling and a weird, odd selection for mascot horror is that what is there to take from this information? The things that you take away from it are that Rambly doesn't like Lloyd, which is something we already know. And the other information is there used to be more Lloyd. Now there isn't. Now, you can make the leap, and a lot of people have made the leap, for example, that like, oh, Lloyd the Lion, he must have done something that hurt a child, and that's why he's not focused anymore, and they introduced Rambly. But the thing is that leap. It's an enormous leap, exactly. And then even when you look in-game, you end up being attacked by Lloyd the Lion. That would make sense if that was what you would take as your indicator, but you're attacked by the other mascots in the game too. So there's no clear link between what is happening and what is being shown. There is, people keep saying that the Indigo Park...
If anything, I would say that, and this is something that I kind of picked up on that I do kind of find somewhat interesting, is that like, I think that the creatures just resemble the various mascots, but aren't the mascots. Like they were meant to be the new mascots and probably did serve at some point until the whole park shut down. They were abandoned or evacuated or whatever. But I don't think that the creature Lloyd is the one Rambly doesn't like. I think Rambly doesn't like the AI Lloyd, which is a different character technically. Like it's unclear whether or not Rambly is talking to pre-recordings or actual characters. It sounds like characters because the snake's like, I'm lonely, and that doesn't seem like he would be so pathetic in the real, right? If he hadn't been abandoned for years. But that indicates
I just thought he was supposed to be Eeyore.
Yeah, I was just like, but he was just so sad. I'm like, I took from that the AI and the creatures are just literally different characters. So even then, like anything about the Lloyd monster you encounter seems irrelevant to the story of why Rambly and Lloyd don't like each other. So you have even less to go on. The most I got is that there was a video that pointed out, because I have watched a few videos about this game, trying to figure out what anyone else has to say about it. And for the most part, it's like a lot of very shallow criticism, a lot of kid gloves and kind of patronizing talk about indie development as if there aren't a billion projects like this that can do 100 times better and so on. But one observation people had was that they pointed at like an old Disney photograph about handing over like the deed to the park or something, and compared that to a picture with Rambly and Lloyd, like the idea that the ownership was passed over or something. And that's like some old feud. And that's at least the closest thing to actual like relevant interpretation that's based on something in real life that could reasonably be the source material, because they're both theme parks and everything. Everything else is mostly just people being like, but what if they kissed?
Yeah. And that, I think, gets to sort of the major problem that I have with this game, which is that it isn't like, this game is not a game that people played and then like came up with opinions about. I feel like a lot of people played this game with a preconceived notion about what it would be, and then just impressed that upon the game, which is weird because that doesn't normally happen with things like this. I feel like it was a very particularly positioned project that was hoping that would happen. Once again, because people don't actually engage with the media that they consume. But moving on, and I'm sure that there is actual lore in the game. There's some stuff set up about a skunk, an evil skunk that like changes people and brainwashes them into being evil in the game, and that you can make some extrapolation from. But my point with this is the primary way you interface with this game is you walk around this theme park. Things are broken. You have to fix them so that you can progress. And your main means of interacting with the world is clicking on collectibles to pick them up, reading an item description, and then clicking on the collectible again to get Rambly to detail to you the history of the object that you're looking at. And by far and away, the thing that I walked away from this game thinking is, wow, there just is nothing to hang on to with this. There really isn't a lot of storytelling that happens. In fact, there's so little to go off of that all I can say is exactly what was said in the game, which is that like Indigo Park once was popular, now isn't, and there are horror mascots there. If you asked me to detail anything about any of the characters, I probably couldn't. In fact, most of the objects just give you flavor text, which is like, here's a golden Rambly plush. It looks like a regular plush spray painted gold. And then you click on it and Rambly's like, wow, you got a retro gold Rambly plush. It was those were really limited edition.
The entirety of episode 1 is an hour-long reestablishing of the blurb paragraph you read when you downloaded the game.
Yes.
Like, and that's basically all it does. Like, it's as little as possible.
Yeah. And just using that Rambly plush as an example, like there's no new information to get from that. It's like, it's a golden Rambly plush. It looks cheap. It was limited edition. And then Rambly goes, wow, you have a golden Rambly plush. It was limited edition and old. It's like, okay, there's no trailhead here. It's an arc with no trailhead, which is just odd. It feels a little bit patronizing.
That probably is a consequence of the script for the implementation of that sort of items just was never went beyond the draft in the when I say draft, I mean the first draft that came with those ideas, and then when it comes to implementation, they can't, it's not, there's no time to reevaluate, to rethink, because the implications could derail the development of the game completely if you all of a sudden realize fundamental
it's just that
problems.
If there's no depth, it defeats the purpose of speaking at all, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, it's the
equivalent. And that's kind of where I am with
I think
that.
you get more depth from the descriptions slightly, and that at least it talks about your protagonist's history with the park.
With the park. Yep, exactly.
Like, otherwise, if you don't do anything with it, it's like the equivalent of like when you play Dragon's Dogma and you go to the taverns and you click on each and you press the talk button. Like not like you press the controller button to talk to them. Like there's a bespoke talk to the shopkeeper button for some reason, but instead of doing the thing that other RPGs do where they spread gossip about local events, they're like, "Yeah, sure is a tavern. You want to buy something?" And that's it. You're like, why is there a button for this? This isn't a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm in a tavern. Why did you record dialogue to remind me that I have to prompt separately besides talking to him in the first place?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like that sort of problem like persists through the whole game. It's like a very constant issue the whole way through. And I'm gonna point to the collectibles as a really good example because they exemplify the issue so well. This is a horror game where your main form of interacting with the world is walking in a straight line directly to where Rambly points you, because even if you want to explore, all of the arenas and hubs are so small and there's no off critical path areas. It truly is just a straight line.
There's one hub around the fountain, which has like 3 shops or restaurants or cafes that are literally just a bare bones, like clearly scaled wrong, like low quality asset, fucked up, like just
I think it's like an asset
strange
flip
space.
Type. Yeah,
like it's just very
asset packs.
You immediately can't tell how tall your character is or what you are. You feel like a rugrat, and people are like, oh, haven't you short people? I'm like, no, this is not short people. I'm pretty sure that Toaster, who is short, also walked into these places like, what's up with these spaces? This isn't how I
literally did. I was
places.
like, these places look like they were built from like an asset pack that was not designed for this game.
It feels like how somebody. It feels like when somebody remade Ad Astra in 3D on itch.io, and you can go check this out for free right now if you want. And like the doors are like 10 feet wide and like square, and like every room is shaped super strangely the moment you look in a slightly different direction than the exact like camera angle of the CG it's based on or the background it's based on. And you're like, that's not, no space would look like, why does it look like this? And like, you walk to that cafe and it's monstrously huge in every direction, and the counters are too tall, and everything is just not shaped like a space that anyone's ever stood in, because it's made by an inexperienced brand new developer. And like, but the thing is, like, these rooms are they just exist to give you one collectible and then you leave, basically. Like the only environmental storytelling decent location-ish thing that happens is like the very first shop is the gift shop. And the gift shop is dense with like, here's keychains of all the characters here, which sets up like what the full roster of creatures are and stuff like that. But the moment you leave that place, every location for the rest of the game is almost like just actively bad, besides maybe Lloyd's like sequence.
Yes. And so one of the other things about this is that the collectibles really highlight sort of the amateur nature of the project, in that so you're in these little hub areas that you're not really supposed to go back to, or you're not really supposed to do anything in. You should theoretically never really reload them. So you go around and you collect the little collectibles. There's like 4 or 5 in this little area. If you do end up going back here, though, the collectibles respawn. Wait. Because, even though they're supposed to be bespoke, important collectibles that you pick up that disappear when you pick them up. However, if you look away and then come back, the collectibles respawn.
What is that? Do you mean like go through a loading gate and back, or go like in and out of the room?
I'm not sure about in and out of the room. If the cell deloads and it reloads, the items are back again. In any way. That's
interesting.
So I noticed this because I was like walking around and he was like, wow, you got a Rambly cup. Those are rare. I'm surprised there's one left. And then I walked away, and then I came back and it was back, and I was like, that's weird. So I picked it up again, and he was like, wow, a Rambly cup. Those are so rare. I'm surprised there was one left. And
there were 2 left.
Yeah. And it was just very
Not
shocking,
so limited
because
after all.
Because again, the major issue with this game as it progresses is that it feels very rushed. And as we know, the game was only developed in a year and a couple months, maybe. It literally just is like just over a year is how it's phrased. And the whole time while I'm playing this free game that was made out of someone's goodwill, I was just thinking, no one knew you were making this. Like, I mean, on like a large level. I'm sure there were fans out there, like people who watched the channel who knew it was happening. But like,
I was gonna say, like, part of the reason why this is able to take off is that it's from a reasonably popular YouTuber with like 300,000 subscribers, and they were putting out like videos in the background, like meet the cast and trailer and so on over the last like 6 months.
But like, what I'm saying is like on a large level, like large scale, you did not have like the masses waiting for this content. Like this, you made a promise to no one, right?
Yeah, like you weren't forced to release an unfinished chapter.
Yes. So why did you release this now? Why is this released in the state that it is in? And the oft stated plea is that it's an indie project by one person and it's expensive to make and they need to fund the Patreon. And that gets to the rest of the game, which when you know that it was made as basically a sales pitch, as an early access demo for a chapter 1, you start to look at the game very differently. Rambly is the best part of the game. This 2D animated mascot designed to, and voiced by a furry, by the way, appeal to furries. So why did the game come out the way it was? To make money, as a plea, please pay for me to make another thing, which is cool. That's fine. Why was it released in the state it was? To rush it out the door so they could get money. Okay. Starting to feel cynical, but whatever. Why does the game end with a sing-along? Oh, because the voice actor sings,
a sing-along that ends with
song,
with the character guilting you. It's like, please come back.
Yeah.
A song about a customer survey that you never are given. You never get a chance to give any feedback. I was so confused. Like, oh, it's the song that leads up to the part where I get the feedback, where I can dump all of the issues I have with this bad chase sequence you made. Oh, there's no form. You never actually. You just say, check out my YouTube channel. Check
out my YouTube channel.
What the subscribe song to the
was
Patreon.
About. It's a call to action, not an actual survey, which is fine. It's whatever. But because I'm already asking all these questions, why does it end with this sing-along when no other part of the game has a sing-along? Okay, on one hand, if I give it the benefit of the doubt, it's because the voice actor likes to sing and he puts up videos of him singing, so maybe he made this song and it was fun. The cynical side of my brain goes, the Portal song went viral. If I put out a song, people will sing it and it will get stuck in their heads and they will engage with my media. Has Been Hotel is really hot right now. This will get the kids.
Yeah, like it is an impressive effort and it is good, but it also is so much easier than making a video game. So
it is so much easier than making a video game.
Much like the intro, it's much easier to put like a trailery sort of attention grabby charming thing that's not interactive in a video in the game, you know, as a YouTuber that's in your skill set, than like making a 3D game that has like level design and sequences that are memorable and AI that functions and chase sequences that don't bug out.
Exactly. And so you just keep looking at this project and you just keep seeing the positions where it's like, this game is more posturing towards something than it is something, which is a shame because Rambly is great and his designs and the mascot designs are very good. But the problem is that it truly feels like they only exist because they will maximize the amount of money this thing earns in a better second project.
Which is why it feels weird that like so what happened is yesterday I made a thread about like, hey, should I make a video discussing Indigo Park? And I was in this context, I was thinking of making like a video essay just reviewing it like a video game, because I think it'd be interesting to break down why it's just like non-functional as a horror game. Like it doesn't really work as a video game if you have any level of standards or history playing video games. Like it should be self-evident, but people act like you're insane, and they kind of did act like I was insane for even bringing that up, as if the rest of video games don't exist around this game, which is odd. But one of the primary defenses that does come up is like, but it's a real passion project from a new indie developer who doesn't care about money and is just doing it for the love. I'm like, everything about this seems calculated to make money very carefully. to the point where I'm like, I don't know how people land on that. And I'm just like, where'd that narrative come from that this person is uniquely inspired to not care about money and they just want to make a thing for the love of it? And like, I'm like, what? Because like it has such a calculated rollout to specifically promote itself and make money and have multiple revenue streams and also be so like personality and YouTube themed that it doesn't matter if the video game behind it's not good and so on. Like even that ass is covered preemptively while also mixing the FNAF and furry audiences and so on. I'm like, it's like it starts to feel like we're the only people that have any hint of this, like of the smell that this is like a little cynical at all, like to the point where I'm like I don't know. I've grown up with literally decades of people being disappointed by hype cycles about video games over and over again. Like, back to Spore, and then the ongoing crisis that is just Star Citizen's promises for an eternity, No Man's Sky, just Cyberpunk. Like it happens again and again and again and again forever, and then we just go right back in again. And obviously, these are huge projects by comparison, promising big things. And this game has relatively smaller promises, but they're monumental things for one person or a tiny first-time developer to accomplish. And like, even in the context of Kickstarter, I've seen dozens of examples of just like, oh, Double Fine set records with the biggest Kickstarter ever in the history of the website, and then years later, Double Fine has run out of money and can't finish the game. They're releasing the first half of the game as a paid product to recoup losses, to then make money to maybe make the second half. Hope it works out. And like, that's an experienced developer of industry professionals failing to make a game where they got several times the income that they asked for in the first place. And so I'm like, I don't know if I would trust a brand new solo developer to deliver on their promises based on a Kickstarter that's based on numbers they have no experience executing on. So it feels like they either just kind of wing it and be like, this will work out number wise, right? And it's like, and like as far as like demos go and episode ones, and like there's a lot of problems I have with the rollout of it's like the way this thing's shown. One, if we take the audience at their word for it, because everyone has just decided, no, it's a demo, it's an alpha, it's not supposed to be indicative of the real product. Well, I would still be worried that the developer wasn't able to deliver on much of anything besides Rambly, and that should make you worried that, like, why would giving them money suddenly make them a better developer that can handle those things if they couldn't do it to begin with? Like, that's not really what the word promise means, as far as like this game has promise. Like, I think it has promise if it does something. This game, it was an incredibly shallow and incredibly cobbled together and weak and buggy and uninspired, terrible horror game that had a very cute raccoon animation placed on screens that people loved. But also, it's just not what episodes are. I feel insane having to point this out, but episodic games actually are based around the business model where you make games of extremely consistent quality. So all future games are supposed to be of equivalent quality as the first episode, basically, but just they continue the story with new locations and like they go forward. That's Telltale, and also just like literally just like everything that's called episodes for like the last like 15 years of Steam they're supposed to be episodic in the narrative, but they're building inherently. It's supposed to be built around the idea of like, I already built the base game and its mechanics and its lore planned out, and just I need to actually develop the narrative in chunks like a TV show. It's not, I'll release episode 1 and then I'll retroactively later figure out how to make episode 2 from scratch, which will be a good game this time, I promise. And it's unclear if there's an implied promise that you would then remake episode 1 to be a good video game too, now that you're good at video game development. But even then, like, the incentive structure does not indicate to do that, because like speaking as a YouTuber and so on, like, everyone already saw episode 1. No one cares about episode 1. It's dead now. So going back to be like, oh, I'm going to go back and spend resources to make episode 1 better is inherently like folly. But it's obvious, but like that means that episode 1 will just stay terrible forever, because it's once again real bad.
Yeah, so the positioning of this, I think, is really important too, because this is actually where my like big cynical conspiracy brain begins to pop open. And it's that first things first, I would like to talk about the chapter 1 thing. A lot of the defense around this game has been, this is just a chapter 1. It's just a demo compared to other chapter 1s by people who have only made, little games or whatever. It's really good. No, it isn't.
No.
Just no. I have played so many chapter 1s of this type. I have played other Mascot horror chapter 1s that are more polished than this, made by small studios. Bendy, once again, Bendy and the Ink Machine, if you look it up now, you can't find part 1, but Bendy and the Ink Machine was released as a part 1 and part 2. Part 1 was free, part 2 you paid $6 for. Or however much you paid for it at the time. Now it's $20, I think, to get them both bundled together in the new fancy remastered pretty version. The point is, that was not released as a demo. That was not released as a it'll get better eventually game. They released part 1 as a full game that people like, that was polished and pretty decent as far as Mascot horror goes. In fact, Mascot horror is so popular that I went into a Hot Topic at the mall and there were Bendy and the Ink Machine Funko Pops there. Which gets to the next thing about this, which is that this is the defense of this is that this was made as a Mascot horror under the premise of what a Mascot horror game should be if kids actually liked and could reasonably like these characters. And I would like to inform everyone that is saying this that kids really like Freddy Fazbear. This is a fallacy to begin with. Because people look at Mascot horror and they apparently claim
that quote,
I don't think
that quote immediately became did you know Viggo Mortensen broke his foot kicking that helmet quote where it's people said that, people started saying that so consistently. I'm like, did you all watch a YouTube video that made this claim? Because you're all saying the same line at me and it's getting really weird.
Yes.
Wait, is it not actually true that he broke his foot?
No, that did happen. It's just one of those. It's just one of those annoyingly consistent quotes. So we joke about it, akin to did you know that the Joker scene was improvised with the exploding? The bomb didn't blow up when he did the thing.
That's probably just people buying into the hype. That happens with AAA games, anyways. They make a marketing claim where, it's going to be really good exploring Starfield because every planet is different.
You can collect all the cheese wheels.
So I'm just saying, people insisting on saying that exact thing. I'm like, it just feels like they all watch the same YouTube video and now they're all echoing the exact same sentence over and over again. Because it's consistent. They're like, why is everyone saying this every time? They're like, finally a Mascot horror where kids would conceivably actually like the mascots. And I'm like, okay, I get that Poppy Playtime as a horrible maw creature, but I don't think that's been a consistent problem in the genre.
Yeah, exactly. That's not really the selling point necessarily.
And even on top of that,
if it's I like the mascots, but the kids, what does it?
Yeah, mean? Well, the thing about this is that people are like, well, Mascot. It implies that Mascot horror has a problem that needs to be solved, which is that who would in their right mind ever like or go to these places? And I think it belies the fact that
I've seen people obsessing over Monty way too much to believe that this is a problem.
Yeah, the Five Nights. I mean, I'm not even talking about adults who like the non-evil versions of these characters. Children fucking love these mascots. Again, Bendy and the Ink Machine has Funko Pops. Fucking Five Nights at Freddy's has Funko Pops. Kids like these characters. There is no world where these mascots are not things that people would want to go to. And even if you look into the lore, the key premise behind all of these games, except maybe Garten of Banban or whatever, is these were places that were really nice and fun to go to at one point. And there was a facade that blocked people from realizing that they were horrifying. That's what people like about them. That's the entire premise of the genre. So to say Indigo Park is unique because you can see how people would actually like the mascots, I would like to inform you that this is a false equivalence because people like the mascots of the other games too. So I just don't see that as a defense. But moving on from just that weird talking point, this game was released as a Chapter 1 on Steam, and yet people are defending it as if it is a demo. And that is really sus, because Steam very deliberately labels demos and early access games.
Yeah, it's specifically circumventing both of those labeling systems to be considered as a real game, which leads to very different motivations and very different like reward structures. But if it is a demo or an early access game, it's essentially lying.
Yes. So a demo does not chart on the top Steam charts. When something has a demo, yes, it can appear, but it's not going to appear as a top product or something like that. Because when someone clicks on a Steam page, psychologically speaking, I work in marketing. I know how this works. I've seen the data for it. When you click on a profile and it just says demo, you get like 10% the clicks that you would get if it didn't say add to library. The same thing applies to early access games. Having the early access banner does not guarantee you sales. In fact, if people are clicking around through Steam, they are less likely to engage with an early access game than they are a game they can buy and just have right now. That is a known, quantifiable fact in marketing. And so deliberately circumventing that for the purpose of going viral with the rest of the viral elements in this game is super sus. And when you defend the game as just a Chapter 1 demo that will clearly get better and it was never intended to be a good game, why are you being so cruel about it? You are literally being tricked. You're being psychologically tricked by how this game was positioned. You're defending something that is actually trying to mislead you. That is very sus, and it's shocking to me that so many people fell for it. Because even when you don't look at the rest of the virality and laser-focused fandom pandering that is in this title, designed to make it kick off and make you forget about all of the other stuff in the game that doesn't really work. Once again, the creator of this game is a YouTuber and a Twitch streamer. And if you look at his channel right now, his videos are all him reacting to people playing his viral game. That is what this was done for. It's a content farm. If you search his name on YouTube, his #1 video is Matt Pat played my game, followed by reacting to YouTubers playing my game. It was designed for this. And it's so shocking to me that people don't see that, because is this a promising thing that could exist that was a passion project? Yes. But also, it is incredibly clear that it was positioned in this way in order to maximize the people that are going to run to its defense. And that is really weird. If you are confident in your game, why are you doing this? And the only answer I can come to is that you're not very confident in the game part of the game. And so it's
and they're
really
kind of a genius.
They're kind of a genius. They're a mad genius.
They're really good at this, which is unfortunately also not game development.
It is, yeah. And don't get me wrong, Unique Geese seems like a great person, and I've had to specify this 100 times whenever I talk about this stuff. It is a interesting idea of a game. The thing I take issue with is how people are talking about it and how it's being positioned. Because the way that it's being positioned seems very deliberately manipulative. And people will criticize other developers and other games for being manipulative in this same way. But for some reason, because they have furry brain rot over Rambly the raccoon, they don't see that it's happening here too. So it makes other complaints about the gaming industry ring super hollow when you're like, oh, I don't buy into the hype cycle marketing. Bethesda's just trying to con you with Starfield. The cheese wheels are just them memeing. That's all it is. And then they see Rambly the raccoon and they're like, oh my God, hi, Rambly. Wow, Rambly. And it's like, okay, you don't actually have principles. You don't have ideology. You're just positioning yourself because you think one thing makes you look more favorable and the other makes your brain tingle, and you're getting conned. And so that's why I'm really bitter about fucking Indigo Park being my #1 video on my whole channel ever. out of any of the things I have spent time on or made, my 1 hour playthrough of Indigo Park, where I had almost nothing to say because it's not a very good game and it's extremely uninteresting and there is nothing to talk about while I played it, has 25,000 views.
And
while the rest of my channel,
interesting.
yeah, and well, now the number one thing I can take away is that people have really low standards, and even when it's very clear that their standards are low, they will just lie to themselves to make themselves feel like they don't have standards, where they don't have low standards, which is depressing. It's a very depressing thing.
We should probably actually get into why it's not good.
Yeah, you can talk
beyond
about that.
Like technical mistakes and whatnot, because it's also just actually a bad video game. This is actually the Toaster brought a whole new perspective to this, which has been cool. But when I first started being like, let's talk about this thing and why it's bad, it was less this angle and more, this game is overwhelmingly positive on Steam, and I very specifically seek out and want to find things that are overwhelmingly positive on Steam, because whenever I see that, I'm like, oh fuck, I'm missing out on something really major here, like a Subnautica or a Darkwood. I can't believe I missed this. This is important. But there's a sub-trend, which is that the other type of there's two types of games that go overwhelmingly positive on Steam. Fucking Game of the Year contender indie games that are incredible, unique experiences like Outer Wilds that are going to blow your mind. And memes. Just meme games. Like, this game's really funny, or this game showed the wokes that they're bad or something, or this game, like, it's a joke and it's free or something. And slight in between stuff like Helltaker, like it's a Sokoban puzzle pusher that's short and free, and it has good character designs, and the artists admitted that they just made this game so that people would draw porn of the characters. You're like, okay, sort of a middle road of like, it's kind of a meme and kind of good, but not like remarkable in its goodness. It's just a Sokoban with some drawn ladies that's short and not like inventing new mechanics or anything. It's not fucking Steven Sausage Roll. But like, this game is thoroughly in the meme category in that it is a viral sensation for reasons outside of its actual gameplay, and that has led to people swarming the Steam page to like do whatever you need to do to qualify to review a free game. I guess just download it and then type a review, like, because like, and I wouldn't be surprised if people reviewed the game without even really playing it or caring about that, or they've made their opinion preemptively based on all the stuff they've been exposed to, and then they're like, yeah, let's I'll play it for a second to review it, and then like, yeah, this is okay. It had Rambly in it, but like it having overwhelmingly positive, like that's a really hard threshold to get. For context, this game, which is a jank, messy, uninspired demo that has one cool character in it, it has more reviews than Animal Well, like. This big push itself overwhelmingly positive on Steam, like pixel art Metroidvania that's like a non-combat like puzzle game where that like has a really inspired like atmosphere and a lot of cool tricks going on throughout it, and like a really extensive like, here's the easy ending, here's the hard ending, here's the fucking nightmare ARG ending you puzzle fucks want, all you perverts. Like, it goes all in on all those crazy Fez type things. And this game has more reviews than Animal Well, which is actually insane, because that's a fully finished game. It's self-made by a small studio that's insanely polished and well made, and has gameplay mechanics, unlike this game, which doesn't have gameplay mechanics. Oh no, we can hear Toaster.
Yeah. When you say that it was developed in a single year, I've only watched Toaster's
Toaster,
videos,
we can hear everything.
Sorry, I Brewing came in and gave me a Coke, so I had to respond to him quickly. I
was just worried that you'd gotten up and walked around and started doing stuff in the room while I was talking.
No, my door opened and
I was like, no, your audio.
Sorry. I was going to say that it's pretty obvious that, well, it's not obvious that the game was made in a year, but when you tell me it's made in a year, I'm like, yeah, I can see that, because it really doesn't have, it's just walking around. It's a walking simulator at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And even down to simple things like the way the death, what are they called? Death zones, or when you fall into the balls, and ball pit,
ball pit.
Even stuff like that. Like it's just reload or teleport to a previous area. There's no.
Yep.
It's just the simplest type of trick in the book, which is fine for a simple game, obviously, and obviously for a 1 year development. But that's the sort of stuff that if the game is going to be about that, and if you design the game to be a walking simulator and to be about horror setting and stuff, you do want to nail those.
It's weird. Like it doesn't function as a walking simulator because it's not dense with narrative or atmosphere, really. Like its atmosphere is incompetently done and its narrative is mostly non-existent. It's just Rambly being like, "But no, this place isn't broken. Okay, it's broken," and that's the arc. And so there's not really much to pick up on there. It doesn't have documents the way that these kinds of games do, or audio logs, or like other perspectives, or any depth going on there. But it's like talking about its level design, it's immediately rough because you're looking around and then you're like, okay, a walking simulator is all about attention to detail. It's about like walking around and looking at these things, like playing someone like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture or Soma. You're looking around and you're picking up on all these really informed level design choices that all build off of what's going on here. Whereas in this game, there's just mountains of debris everywhere. That don't make sense. Like mountains of debris.
I stopped in my playthrough and asked about this. I was like looking around at all the crumbled buildings and I was like, how long ago is this place destroyed? It would take like decades for it to break down like this.
It would take an eternity for the actual physical building to start crumbling for seemingly no reason. But also specifically, the lights are still on. The Ferris wheel still running somehow in the background, which we don't have context for yet. But that contradicts the insane levels of rubble that's happening everywhere, as if this place was bombed. Like it looks like it.
Syndrome.
Yeah, it's got Fallout rubble everywhere, which like that's its own thing. Like this is a thing that even AAA games can be somewhat guilty of. Is like fucking Fallout New Vegas. In the outskirts of town, hits you with the fact this is the most popular prostitute in the entire area. She's so good. Everyone's talking about her all the time. Then you go to her room, and her front door is blocked by rubble that the door clips through, and her entire floor is covered in like candy wrappers and garbage and newspapers. I'm like, why isn't she swept? She's the most popular prostitute. Nobody cleans this room. Why does it look like it's been abandoned since the apocalypse, and now she just fucks in here? I don't understand that this is.
One of the things
dirty.
One of the things I think about this with the context of like with the context of like presentation and how to create a believable environment too, though, is that this game is lacking polish in a lot of places that like really matter from a user design perspective, but like are overlooked because people are like, it's a passion project. I don't want to harp on it. But one of the things that stuck out to me is that there's absolutely no transitory animations in anything. At all.
Ever.
So very, very frequently in this game, you will like get into a ride that you have to like, you literally have to stand in, you have to sit in as it brings you somewhere. So you walk up to the ride and you click the go in button and then the screen fades to black and there's no sound effects. It fades back to screen with no sound effect. And then you're on the ride and then it fades to black, no sound effects, you're off the ride.
It's so bare bones that it's like actively embarrassing at some point. Like as far as I can tell, your character has no animations whatsoever besides flopping around their flashlight. So every interaction, so the only thing you ever do is you hold your bracelet up to a thing in a canned animation that completely locks you out of the game while it's happening. Outside of that, your character just runs around with a floppy flashlight in their face and then blacks out every time they look at an interactive object and teleports to the next scene. To the point where I think even, I can't even remember if their character model shows up in their death or if it just shows the enemy killing you, basically. But like it's shockingly bare bones there.
That's the other thing about the death scenes. I think for this game, it would make, because it's 3D, like it's not Five Nights at Freddy's where you have very little control over what's going on. To the point where I think there's a much more, there's like an inherently much more distance or a much bigger distance between the player and the main character in Five Nights at Freddy's than there is in any first person game like this. So like for example, one of the scenes that I thought was interesting of the video is when the bird, I forget her name, there's like this bird that shows up in the door. Yes, I don't remember the name, but yes, bird shows up, a door opens, and this big fluffy bird shows up, and like she's like all this. I say she, but I don't know. I was watching without sound, so don't know the context. But so the bird shows up, and then there's this cute little fluffy design, and my instinct was like, oh, let's see the details of this thing. Let's move in, and that's more or less your attitude, Toaster, in the video. You just sort of like stay and see what the death scene is, but the death scene is completely detached from your attitude as a player. So you can't be. It's just like, oh no, that I'm being murdered now by this bird, instead of being like, oh, hug this bloody beak that's about to murder me.
Yeah. Well, what's weird about it too is that like even the death scenes, you would assume that they would be interesting, but all that really happens is she goes like ah, and then like is in your face, and then you hear a bone cracking sound, and your character just falls over, and that's it. And it's like 5 seconds. It's not even an interesting death scene. It's not like an Alien Isolation where you like, oh no, the xenomorph got me, and then you look down and you see it has like impaled you or something. It's like once again, there isn't really even an animation for it. It's just you get a close up of her face, you hear a bone cracking sound, and then it fades to black. And it's like, okay, well, this is underwhelming.
And that's the sort of details that I think would make up for a promising game.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Where a demo would be a 10-minute thing with cool death animations and 1 or 2 characters and an interesting premise. That would be a demo that would be promising. An hour-long sort of more more horizontal slice of the game kind of thing, where everything is unpolished, because everything is unpolished. That's not. I don't think that's what promise is. If anything, this is a cool piece for if the author wants to develop for another person's game, and they say, hey, I've made this. I have all these abilities that I can do, and I can whip something up by myself.
And then the art team can work on the animations,
and the design team can work on the game design, and the writers and all the other stuff that does make for a promising sort of game in this sense in the marketing. But obviously, it takes a lot of effort and work to do the work. But
this is super off topic now because I've gotten so derailed. But I was just saying, like, when I was talking about the debris, when you get through one of the locations, you just teleport forward through the park, then look back and hear a rumble noise, and there's just a giant pile of debris that has blocked the entire way out.
Oh yeah.
And like that's what I was building to when I was talking about that.
I noted that when I was playing too.
Yeah, like that's completely insane that this place is completely collapsing on that scale, because nothing about that even slightly makes sense. But also that debris can't have come from anywhere in the scene you're looking at. Like there just magically is an impossible amount of debris that has spawned behind you without destroying the surrounding building. But it's also just like such a weirdly heavy-handed way of being like, oh, every time you go somewhere you can't go back because they've got to block you, even if it means like a crumbling concrete building, or I think it was a brick building. I'm like, what the fuck? This place is built to last. Why is it doing this? But also the fact that it can't have an animation and it can't have like any production to it, so it is just like play a sound, look behind you, oh, it's debris.
Yep.
And it's debris that's also like not acknowledged going forward. So it's like you're not like, oh damn, this place is really falling apart. Like there's not.
How am I gonna get out?
Yeah, it's like because your character seemingly doesn't want to leave yet anyway. So it's not even like serving as an exit. Like having an exit get cut off in a way like that serves. And we're going to compare to other games inevitably, and it's going to sound slightly unfair because I'm comparing to games made by development studios, but I'm just using examples of a concept being effective, and you can do these concepts in low fidelity. It's just my examples are often bigger ideas, but like, for example, a relatively cheap trick that Halo did in the flood level is that you go in, you think you're going to fight maybe Covenant or save some Marines or something, and you don't know if the flood exists yet, and then you get swarmed by horrible monsters you've never seen before, and it's the dark turn in Halo. At one point you go back towards you reach one of the elevator shafts, and it seems like this will be your exit because you took like an elevator like this on the way in, and then you press the button and fiery debris that ultimately is the puzzle pieces that would make up an elevator platform all shower down, and you're like, oh, I can't go back. I can't get out this way. And in a similar way, if scary thing happened and you went back to the exit the way that you came in and it was suddenly blocked in some horrible way, that would be like a narrative beat and a development. Here, it not only happens incredibly cheaply and environmentally, storytellingly, breakingly, just upsettingly, asynchronously, like just doesn't, nothing about it works, but it also doesn't function as a beat because you're not trying to leave anyway, so it doesn't function as a raising of stakes. Like to a large extent, a lot of this thing doesn't feel like it's thought out as a narrative sequence that builds in a sensible way because of stuff like that, like the lack of like developments, the lack of like beats, the lack of scenarios. You go on to this parade, not the parade, this ride that's like you sit on this. It's a dark ride. That's what they're called. You get on the dark ride and you're being introduced to each character one by one, and it does a slightly creative thing, which is it introduces a handful of minor characters and then one destroyed skunk character that builds the intrigue. And I do like that. That part is weird in that it's like it's really cheap and weirdly convenient, and there's some jankiness to the visuals there. But you go in, there's a destroyed mechanical character on the way in, and your horror game gut feeling is that you're gonna go in and you're gonna press the button, and then on your way back out, you're gonna see that the mascot is gone, and you're like, oh fuck, it's out there somewhere. So when it doesn't do that, that is kind of that can interpret that as like a level of restraint. Like it's still waiting for the scares essentially. Like both, there's kind of no wrong answer. Both versions of those are fine. But before you get to that segment, the fucking segment where the bird talks to you is so fucking long compared to all of the other ones that it's actively like pacing killing. And to some extent, it's like, oh, this is the monster you're going to encounter in this episode. But compared to Lloyd and the sea serpent, the birds section it's like a minute long, I think, of just like nothing's happening. Rambly's
crashing my plane.
Yeah, Rambly is doing a canned talking animation, and the bird is just a wobbling sign, and they're just like vamping back and forth and killing time seemingly, and it goes on for ages when nothing's happening visually, and there's no like, they don't even like animate the cardboard sign of the bird to do anything silly, like, oh no, I'm gonna crash or anything. It's just slowly making its way across the room like one of those race horses you shoot a water gun into at a carnival. So it's just immediately, it's like, this is weirdly boring for a canned linear narrative sequence that I'm stuck in. Like, do you think it'd be paced at all? But the game really nosedives, because we talked about a lot of stuff up until now. And I also don't have that much to complain about the Lloyd segment where you encounter a lion, and particularly I like the detail that when you walk in, he's just fucking staring at you from behind the debris with glowing eyes and just waits there. And that's like, that's successfully uncomfortable, and elements of that sequence build tension enough, and that like they keep making you think he might come at any moment. So on your whole exit, you're kind of waiting for the chase sequence to happen, and it not happening itself is kind of like a moment of like them kind of getting you a bit. My main complaint about Lloyd is that when you it's really unclear in the moment that you using your bracelet somehow repels Lloyd, because I guess it plays a noise that it must affect the creature like a dog whistle or something, and it makes him run away for a second, and that's how you survive. And it'd be more effective if something like that was established in any way as a narrative or gameplay mechanic, and you had the ability to do it on purpose, or even that it was just in some way set up so that you could like have any kind of like context for it while it's happening. In the moment, it's just you have to like just intuit that's what's happening and like hope that you hear the noise and put together what it's doing. Well, even though it itself is happening in a jump scare, so you probably like made a noise yourself so you didn't hear the noise in the game. Probably there's just like a number of things that are kind of, that don't quite work about that for what it's supposed to function as a scene. But that's like not splitting stuff to split hairs over. Everything about the bird is actively horrible.
Yeah, it's a terrible sequence.
Like the the dark ride part with the bird was already bad, but then you get into the building that's dedicated to the bird, and it feels even more unfinished than ever before, with giant weird pieces of debris and strange visuals and like terrain to get stuck on and weird like no one did. It feels like no one did the play testing of just like hopping around this environment to see like what you can get, like how your character interacts with the walls and floor and everything, because some things are just weird. You play on the way in. There's a technically optional but hard to miss arcade game that lets you I guess find out the backstory or something, if it's supposed to be that the bird got corrupted by the skunk. I guess I don't know why there's a video game explaining this, if that's what happened in real life, or why the skunk is seemingly expositing this via 2D platformer. But the 2D platformer is the first really horrible part of the game, because it is just actively incompetent. Like, your jump is floaty and bad. Your field of view is way too narrow to clearly see ahead of yourself while you're platforming. Everything about the mechanics feels bad. You're a 2D character on a 3D environment that is like perspective scrolling, so it makes it hard to tell where the boundaries of the ledges are. And this could all be pretty damning, but ultimately it's just such an easy, simple nothing of a platforming game that it can't frustrate much, because there's nothing to it. Like, it's comparable to like a handful, like it's comparable in quality to a handful of furry porn platformers that are out there for free. Essentially, the games where you platform around and you encounter monsters, and based on how they interact with you, a handful of different scenes might play for adults. It's that level of polish, basically. It's just actively like, oh, anyone who has actually played a platformer before, this is really bad compared to that. And like that is what it is. But that sequence ends, you find out that the bird's been corrupted, I guess. Like, if you interpret that game as being canon, which is itself confusing to think about, but whatever. But then you get to the actual the meat of this particular chapter, which is the one gameplay section, which is the bird. And the chase is actively horrible. So first of all, I died several times, and some of it was incompetency and mistakes. Some of it was just strange glitches or who knows what.
Yeah.
Some of it is just the game has such bad feedback that it's actually actively hard to tell how you died in some cases. But my first death is that you encounter the bird, it's clawing the door open, and then it does its like announcement that I am in fact a monster you should be running from, like telegraphing. So I then immediately turn around and start running, and it catches me anyway. And I'm like, wait, but I'm running the other direction at full speed. How did it catch me? So seemingly its speed is not like tuned correctly to allow the player to run away successfully. So I only ever escaped the bird when I preemptively ran away. Like, because once I've died, I subsequently am running into the pipe preemptively, waiting for the game to let me go through it, because it won't let you through it first. So I never died there again, but I died while playing it the intended way, which is watching the animation, then getting yelled at and be like, oh fuck, run. And I wasn't close to it, so the fact that I turned around and ran should have meant that I was safe, but it instantly caught me and killed me. You go through forward, and you go through this big obstacle course where you're running from this bird, and there's sometimes a forking path between two options. I think twice you can go left into a side room or go forward through a pipe, and both times the bird's coming out of the pipe at you, so it's the wrong way, and you'll die if you go to take that way, so you have to take the side room. I think it happens twice in the same sequence. I played the sequence so many times I can't remember its structure cleanly anymore, because of the fact that I was having weird deaths, so I can't remember if that happens twice in the same sequence or not. But that's functionally the only quirk in the entire chase sequence where you kind of do a thing for a second, is having to deduce, oh, one of these directions is a trap. That's it. The rest of the time, you just run down a linear hallway that is obscured in its linearness because you keep going up and down floors via a trampoline. And then you get to the end where you're literally in a linear hallway down like a back room of a warehouse, then a series of linear hallways that seem to be human height vents, if I could tell what they were. They seem to be 6 foot tall vents is what you're running in, because there's like fans everywhere.
Yeah. That's assuming the main character is 6 foot tall.
Well, I'm just saying, like, he's an adult, as far as we can tell. He's a YouTuber. but the resources needed to get in here, like he is an adult, and so by like it doesn't matter if he's 6 feet tall. These vents have to be 6 feet tall to fit humans that are running at full height,
right?
Because they have to be taller than you. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the vents were exactly, but one, I had 2 separate deaths where I'm running down that hallway that has the collectible in it that's completely linear, and all you can do is hold forward and run. I died twice there out of nowhere, and I'm like, what can I do differently? I'm just running. I'm running full. I can't hit shift harder. There's no stamina meter. There's no mechanics for changing your speed. I'm just running in a straight hallway, and I'm dying multiple times to a creature that seems to just catch me anyway. Which leads to my own question about the creature, which I don't know if the creature has AI or if they literally just like run in straight lines down these hallways at a fixed speed, and then they kill you if they touch you, and like maybe the speed isn't tuned very well, and she goes faster than you sometimes unfairly, which you can't do anything about because that's just how fast you move. Just very strange. And the reason why I'm so unsure about how the bird works is because, one, since I got caught instantly for even glancing at it before running at the beginning, I know that I just have to run the whole time. That means I never look at the bird. So it's hard to be properly afraid of the bird because I have no idea what they're like. Which that itself is its own thing of like, part of why horror games are scary is because you have to look at the monster and react to the monster. Like Alien Isolation and Outlast both specifically trap you in sequences where you have to figure out how to hide from the thing. Like Resident Evil 8 and its infamously scary baby monster sequence would not be as scary if it was just a surprise monster that showed up in a hallway and you ran from it and then never looked at it again because you're just running from it until you find an exit. You specifically have to go deep into this place, into a dead end, turn on the power, and then find one of 3 hiding spots to hide in while this horrible thing comes through, and you hope it's not going to find you, and you're not entirely sure if it's going to find you, and it's making horrible noises, and you're trying to figure out what the fuck you're looking at. Like, that's core to the genre, is having to encounter the monster in some way. But in this sequence, you never look at the monster past the initial run from me moment. So there is no building tension throughout this thing. There is no interplay. There is no idea of like the pacing of a chase or the types of like stages of a chase involved. Like, it doesn't feel like I can't make wide assumptions, but like it comes off like the developer never played Soma and never played Outlast and never played Resident Evil 8 and never played any of these games where you probably don't have interactive fights where you don't fight the monster, but you have to like run from the monster, and there's a series of different modes and pacings to that. Like, it's a structured thing. It's not just continually run the whole time until you're gone. On top of this, the bird makes some noises, but not really. So you can't really tell where the bird is behind you. You have no sense of how close or far away they are. Up until including the parts where I died, there was no sense the bird was near me when I died. So I literally can't tell if the bird just like fail-safe auto-killed me via a bug or actually caught me, because there was no sound of the bird approaching me from behind in any way. So there's no feedback during the chase that the chase is even happening for the most part, which is very strange. But then the feedback gets even worse, because whenever you die, you get treated to a furry painting of the bird being menacing and evil looking, and it's like it's the "you died to Molly" screen, and it's the only one like that in the game, I think, because I think it's the only monster that can kill you. I don't think Lloyd can actually catch you. But the corner of the screen says Molly can mimic voices. Don't be fooled. And I'm like, what? There's 2 things. One, Molly is not. She's unintelligible. So
yeah.
Like, if you watch YouTube videos with subtitles that have painstakingly translated it outside of the context of you running from a monster while playing a video game, you can technically notice that she has, like, lore lines. Like, she's quoting things someone has said around her before, and you can extrapolate something from that, and that might even be, like, that might technically be the most, like, storytelling that happens in the game in some way. But when you're playing the game, she's completely incomprehensible, because she's a horrible monster voice that just happens to be saying things she must have heard at some point. But 2,
well, I think
it's a failure of gameplay, because that is an interesting idea, death screen, that the game never does. Because what if you actually did reach these branching paths, and then you heard Rambly's voice like, "Oh no, come in here, I'll help you," and you're like, "Rambly, you don't sound so good." Like, something slightly off about Rambly's voice. and then it's like, oh no, it's Molly. No, because
Yeah.
that would entail this sequence having any kind of gameplay or beats or being a set piece of any kind. So they don't do that. So
Yep.
the mimicking also never comes up mechanically. So they're warning you about nothing because Rambly is completely absent. That's an even better part, is that Rambly is absent during this sequence and is ultimately your salvation in the good outcome. So Molly impersonating Rambly would be an effective beat that they just don't bother to do, despite laying the seeds right there to very obviously do it, to the point where they even put branching paths in them, but all you do is stand there for a second and see Molly coming and go the other way. Whereas Molly should be, like, there should be a horrible, like, echoing Rambly-like voice coming out of the pipe trying to lure you in, like it's the like fucking it like, come down here, we all float down here. But that would be an actual memorable horror beat that makes her a good monster, and they laid the lore groundwork to put that in the game, but then just didn't put it in the game anywhere, and that's absolutely brutal. But like, and then speaking of laying the groundwork for having an actual sequence for an actual horror game, like akin to the ones I've played dozens of, because I play video games for a living and I'm speaking from a place of experience here, like the part before the Molly chase, they introduce, oh, here's a combination you need to open a door. Go through the maze and find the symbols that let you solve this puzzle to get out of the sequence. That part has no gameplay. Yep. That is literally the type of set piece that you put a player and a monster in. That's in every Outlast game, include the multiplayer one and 1 and 2, and it's also just in most of these games. It's in Alien Isolation. There's always like, here's the slightly non-linear area where you can go 3 different locations to find the things you need that are like keys or fuses or something, while avoiding a patrolling monster. That's gameplay. And this game, but because this game, as far as I can tell, I don't think has AI at all for its monster. I genuinely think the monster just goes in a straight line through the chase sequence, and that's why it's linear. And it just catches you if you don't perfectly stay ahead of it, and it's also not play tested well for that feature. Because it doesn't have AI, they can't do the horror sequence. So you do just walk through a maze that itself is pretty linear, memorize 3 children's symbols and put them in, and the only thing you're teased with is a couple of like, oh, is the monster here? Like glimpses, but no horror gameplay. Like, it's not rising to even the most basic competency levels of the genre, ranging all the way from AA, I'll call Outlast AA, why not, to like literally like everyone's a little block man indie games I've played. Like, everyone else has this figured out. It's so uniquely failed here that I've basically never seen this happen before. Like, it's actually like impressive that a game would just do nothing with its concepts and not even bother being a horror game, essentially. Like, this is why I feel insane when people are like, oh, it's really promising and it's a great start. I'm like, they didn't make the game, and everyone knows how to do this. So it starts to feel genuinely like there's a super young adult / teenage audience that just watches YouTube videos and was introduced to horror entirely via this subgenre of Mascot horror games. And they're all getting together and brainstorming and essentially inventing the concept of horror games from scratch with zero outside experience or having ever encountered other games before. And so they think that things are like impressive and profound when like the rest of the industry did this 30 years ago. Like, it makes me feel insane. It's legitimately like a media literacy issue when people defend this kind of thing, where you're like, what's going on? You don't know any media? Oh, okay. Yeah. That contextualizes this, I guess, because that's so weird.
Well, that also applies to the fact that like this game is one of those situations where people primarily interface it without playing it. So of course they don't have exposure to the other games like it, because they're also not playing those.
Yeah, and if you only watch these things, then you don't care about the gameplay beats or why they'd be interesting, because you just want to watch the Rambly sequences, then look at the monster design, and then hear that it mimics things, and then write your fan fiction about the mimicking voice and build off of that. It's absolutely wild. I was sincerely appalled when they gave me the horror sequence and then just did nothing with it. And I laid the groundwork earlier in this rant where I'm like, I understand there are upsides to restraint in horror. I gave you examples, everyone, of times where hinting that something might happen and not doing it can be good. This was not it. That sequence where this clearly meant to be a gameplay gauntlet and nothing happens is just an unfinished game.
Yeah.
You gain nothing from not doing a gameplay sequence there. You're just showing that you probably couldn't do that. And that's real scary when you're then doing a Kickstarter for tens of thousands of dollars that then multiplies its profit so that people have now, I think it's already over $200,000. And I'm like, whew. I hope if people are backing this project purely because they just want to see more Rambly animations, then I fully respect your clarity of purpose. But if you're doing it expecting somebody who's never made a game with any gameplay in it before to suddenly manifest gameplay based on the vague promise that, I don't know, man, just hope it works out, then I hope you're just ready to have lost your money. Because there just isn't evidence that the product you're backing would ever be whatever you've decided it might be in your head. And like this isn't even shade at the developer. Like video games are incredibly hard to make, and like I'm terrified of making them. I went to school with the intent of making them, dropped out of my computer science degree midway through because I saw so much terrifying shit about the industry that I was like, I'm gonna be a geologist now. And I'm currently still afraid to even try making a visual novel because of the sheer amount of work that would take. And that's like not even a real video game. It doesn't have like a level or a mechanic in it. So I get it. So it's impressive you made this at all, but I have to like be the dissenting voice in terms of like the widespread response to it and the level of hype and the overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam and everyone pledging money to it. I'm just like, I hope everyone has actually thought about like the likely reality of how this project will play out, because I would love to be wrong. I never want projects to be bad. I don't wish ill of game developers, but the evidence just isn't there that this will ever be a good project beyond a vehicle for Rambly.
I want to raise there's another problem. I'm not disagreeing with you, Keith, on that. Although I will say that anybody can learn how to make those polish stages of a video game, and anybody can learn.
It's just the time to do that was in your pitch.
But I know, and even yeah, that's true, and I will get to that as well. That's absolutely true. But even if your pitch is a 1 hour long unpolished stage of a game, it's feasible that the next time you put out something, it's going to be a polished version of a game. What I want to raise the attention to, though, is the incentives behind doing that, and I'm sure the author is going to feel those incentives very fast the moment they start dedicating time to polish, because making another hour long chapter 2 is going to take them, like, let's say 6 months maybe.
And now things are episodic. Now the goal is you need to answer to these fans and make the thing as fast as possible. And
exactly.
So now the incentive is not to improve; it's just to keep laying more tracks in front of the moving train. So it's extremely the entire incentive structure of this project is actively not to improve the game, but to make more of it.
Especially because the first one already, is being successful. So, let's improve. Let's continue with this thing that works. But I mean, obviously, the author could absolutely just go back and polish and improve, but that, I think that's better achieved when you lay the groundwork with trying to solve those polish problems on your demo rather than sort of just having
there's a whole, the polish thing itself is sort of worth talking about. When I think, we were talking about like Molly and her sound design and stuff, but the game in general has like a very poor means of communicating feedback. Like, it has really bad sound design in general. Obviously Rambly's voice acting is great, and Rambly's song is fun. But like,
my heart melted when even in the first scene where he's like, let me get a look at you over here, and his voice changed slightly and he got close to the camera. I'm like, oh, but that's not a video game.
One of the things,
Rambly is great. Yeah.
One of the things I noticed though is that like in a lot of the puzzles or in moments, doors will open, and I didn't know they were opening because there's no sound effect for the door moving. And like there were multiple times in my playthrough where I turned around and was like, did the Switch do anything? What is going on? Because there's no feedback. And that goes to the Molly chase as well, of like, it would be different if you could hear things, or like if the different terrain had different sounds. Like, this is stuff video gaming as a whole figured out how to do 20 years ago. Like, when you walk on tile, it sounds like tile. When you walk on plastic, it sounds like plastic.
The game doesn't even have different walking sounds. You just make the one walking noise no matter where you are, which is very different.
So as you're running around in the play place, you can't track. It's a bunch of different textures and materials. So you would think, okay, I'm being chased.
You're in a squishy bounce castle, and you're hearing the entire time.
The whole time you're running. And so it just makes it completely fucking impossible to judge what is happening. And that is really, really tough to communicate to a player. Yeah. But the thing is that like this is one of the things that kills me about modern fucking game development and game discourse is like, you go on YouTube and you search like Elden Ring gaming sins, and it'll be like, you jumped into a wall 27 times with torrent and got stuck in the terrain. Ding, game is bad. It's got a glitch. But then people look at this game and they're like, oh, it's so perfect. It's such a passion project. It's so amazing. Can you imagine? It's so good. This is what more games should be like. And I'm like, there's no polish here. There's no polish here. What are you talking about? If Elden Ring did this, if any other video game you tried to play did this, you would completely destroy it. But you're not.
And I can forgive a lack of polish more when I see ambition, but there's no ambition here either, because the game's not trying to do anything mechanically. It just has Rambly and hallways.
That's a good point.
Like, it doesn't.
Ambition does make up for lack of polish. That's a very good point.
Indigo Park does not fumble the ball while reaching for great heights.
No.
It's doing the bare minimum of being a game where you walk down a hallway, and it's fucking it up constantly. And it's like, but that's all you're doing. This game's not even interactive mostly. You couldn't just make a pretty environment to walk through a little bit? Or even just more storytelling in it? Like, even if it is like fucking Dead Space wall blood that spells cut off their limbs. Like, just like almost anything beyond, like, because after the gift shop, the environmental storytelling basically just quits. And the level, because I do not count like, oh, the bakery has rotten baked goods because it's been abandoned. That's not adding anything. That's just you logically filling out the environment. That's not storytelling.
Yeah.
So it actually,
it's just very very unpolished and unthought of, and it's very weird to see people look at these things and be like, this is what I want from games, and then like, we're living in a world. May 2024 is going to go down in history as one of the absolute greatest months in indie gaming history. Like, truly, so many fucking good Game of the Year contender indie games came out.
Lorelei and the Laser Eyes.
Yeah.
Animal Well.
Yeah, fucking Venture to the Vile, Dread Delusion,
Crow Country,
Crow Country, Nine Souls, Haunty.
Dread Delusion came out this month?
Yeah, Dread Delusion came out on the 14th. I've been playing it. It's very good.
Yeah,
1000 Times Resist came out as well. That's also really good. Cryptmaster came out, and Cryptmaster's really good.
Yeah.
And
to be clear, you're hearing from indie game fans that want to play indie games. I don't like playing AAA games. I literally, like, I'll pop in for like a Capcom franchise here and there, but otherwise I'm like being held at gunpoint whenever I play a AAA game. Usually I'm like, no, please don't make me play another open world.
Another Crab's Treasure also came out this month, and that game is pure joy.
Oh yeah, that looks nice.
And like, it's just like insane. It's just insane that out of all of the games,
I got an entire year's to-do list out of this month. I'm fucked.
Same. And I've been trying to cram them all into this month, and it's really hard. This month is incredible for games, and it's distressing and sad to me that of all of these games, people are focusing on Indigo fucking Park instead of like the fact that Indigo Park the people who are very supportive of Indigo Park are saying like, you need to support indie work. We need to have good passion project art that like, and give it a financial incentive to exist. While I know for a fact Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is not going to make back its budget for like a year and a half. Like,
and to be clear, like listeners who are frustrated with us, because some of them will be, and so on, we do not begrudge the developer his success. We're not anti the project. We're begrudging you your choices. We are specifically this is at you. It's not at the people that happen to make a thing that you happen to fixate on so hard. We're going after you for your choices. Which might make you angrier, but don't make this about like, oh, we're bullying the developer. It's like, no, it's just we're criticizing the product they made, but in the terms of like your consumption habits.
Yeah, as somebody who's coming at this from an outside perspective, because I didn't play the game, I only watched Toaster's video, and sort of I'm sort of trying to add to the conversation as much as I can, but I have an outside perspective. You guys are not coming across as being aggressive towards the developer. But you are definitely you're ragging on the fans. My God, can you just leave the fans alone?
Which is that should be the title of this podcast as a series. We need to like rebrand it, because historically, that's what this podcast is. Like, if you're new here because you saw an Indigo thumbnail, this is the anti-hype wave podcast essentially. We're somewhat infamous for this. Some people get really mad, but then keep watching and so on. Like when we do, we'll like live stream a showcase of like, here's the E3 or whatever equivalent. Like, oh, look at these new Microsoft games or these new Sony games. And we'll be like, this looks like garbage. That's just a lie. That game's not even gonna come out. Like we'll just be ragging on the entire sequence and then be like, oh shit, that one game looks really good. And that is meaningful when we're like, oh, Cocoon looks really cool in the middle of this montage of Drek and a bad trailer for a Perfect Dark reboot and stuff like that. And like that's has been the habit. We do kind of often voice the dissenting. We're often the dissenting voice versus the like hive mind, the collective social media opinion that has been around. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but like I think it's worth having that discussion more often than not, because there's often like I don't know, there's often like such a social media consensus about stuff and like the popular opinion, and it's often not based on the reality of the scenario. And it's also like, and then there's also just like the endless habit of people funding hype waves, then being disappointed and burned again and again, and then never learning from that habit, that pattern. Like, hey guys, we're old. We've been burned so many times that we're numb. Let me tell you what this is like. Anyway,
I think for me, I was only burned maybe twice. And the first time was definitely Oblivion, but then it took me a little while. I don't remember what the second one would be. So, to the point where I think it may be a matter of just age, and maybe not like
my example of being burned is one of the weirdest ones, because I was burned by Mass Effect 1 being nothing like what any of the trailers promised, and then it became one of my favorite games of all time anyway for completely different reasons because of the game it actually was. I actually really liked, but I would. All of its early trailers are about like its incredible explorable universe and all this crazy like it's so easy to promise gamers scope and the idea that it'll be huge and incredible, and it'll be like all the things that you imagine it will be, man. Like that's what advertising's goal is to let you imagine what a thing might be and fill in the blanks of what you want it to be, and then just like don't contradict that and just kind of let that be, to the point where like I also kind of fell into the hype cycle for years with No Man's Sky, looking forward to seeing how it was coming out. But then,
really, you fell for No Man's Sky?
Not when it came out. When
I saw
the initial trailers, I was like, I'm interested in seeing how this goes. This looks ambitious.
Really? Oh.
But in the year before it came out, I was like, okay, guys, and I made a video about this. I was like, let me explain to you using Mass Effect why this game's not going to actually fulfill its promises because it's made by a smaller developer and is promising even more insane things. And like, let me use these examples of games that have promised insane scope, and then when you get to it, even if they do technically have infinite content, the content itself is garbage. And then people, and like, this was all obvious and easy to tell, like back in like 2016, 17 or whatever that game came out. But then people didn't learn, and they just thought Starfield would do it too. And like, guys, Starfield made the same promise that Mass Effect and No Man's Sky did. It's obviously going to be garbage, and then it was garbage in the exact predictable way that anyone who had eyes knew it would be before it came out. Like, note for note. I was like, what do you mean? Of course it's just going to be an empty garbage. That's the thing. Is
I
like,
think
we're talking
everybody that got burned by,
we're old, and then a new generation gets tricked every 5 years, basically. Yeah. And so to an extent, us talking about this stuff, I'm like, guys, listen. We've been burned for decades. I know that this appeals to a really young audience. I'm trying to communicate to you. It's you're projecting onto it. You're like, it's not the end of the world. If you lose $20 to a Kickstarter, it's not the end of the world. But just know that, just be aware that on some level you are projecting an idea onto a game that you would like to exist, and it's extremely unlikely throughout the history of game development. And also just the very basic observable facts of this game's situation. It's just really unlikely that it's going to be the thing that you hope it'll be one day. And enough time will pass by the time it even comes out that you probably will have grown older and kind of moved beyond. Because Kickstarters take long enough that, like, if you're in this younger age, your life moves so fast that you're going to be in a different era of your life by the time this game even comes out anyway. But it'll be a learning experience. I don't know, man. You already spent the money. The Kickstarter's already successful.
I think. I mean, definitely the industry engenders that sort of attitude towards video games. So the marketing and even the developers, to an extent, know full well that when they announce a game, they're not necessarily telling you how the game is going to play. They're telling you the bare minimum about the game so that you can fill in the blanks. Because what they want to sell you on is the promise you make in your mind, rather than what he's actually
They want you to imagine how cool you're going to be as the hacker god in Watch Dogs based on these trailers where, oh my god, I pressed the button and then the guardrails came up and it fucked up the intersection and destroyed that car, and like, that's a thing you would ever even know to plan in an open world.
And like, that's why I hate when I see
watching every showcase of new games trailers that have supposed gameplay. That, like, the 8-minute gameplay demo they always do in these these things, because they're so curated and they're so full of things that no player would ever perform, and it's all like the equivalent of like BioShock Infinite's quote unquote gameplay demo that wasn't even slightly representative of the final product. But like, even when you're watching, you're like, how do I play this game though? Like, moment to moment, how does this actually manifest? Because this was
clearly not gameplay though.
Yeah, it's like this isn't a pre-rendered cutscene, and it definitely shows like some like, oh, this is my walking animation type stuff, but like, this isn't like functionally a level that it could be in a game, because you're not doing
a concept gameplay, and it likely was built internally as a concept and then just propped up, because that does happen. Like, internal teams, especially in bigger studios where there's multiple people working on different games that never get released, like, internal teams will make these montages where they're like, oh, this is how it could look. And then the marketing sees that and is like, oh, I'm going to pitch that to our publisher, or we are the publisher. We're going to pitch that we're going to sell that, or, you know.
I definitely wish that more people would look at these insane trailers that are supposedly gameplay and then like use their own know-how and experience with video games to like that they've played before to then backfill what the game actually is like how it's structured moment to moment, even 5 minutes before and after what you're looking at, to even try to imagine it being a real level. Because that'll immediately destroy most trailers you see like that, like the BioShock Infinite gameplay trailer, where you're like, this isn't a video game. This isn't even slightly a video game.
Let me just finish my point about what the industry engenders, though, because people, to enjoy games, and like, people do this on an instinctive level, so I'm not teaching anybody here that's listening. I'm just sort of like pointing out what they already know. But when you enjoy, as a player, when you enjoy a video game, it can be because you saw in the Steam page, especially for more curated games, that is likely the case. But for more for more open-ended, maybe shooters or action games, or just, multiplayer, whatever, you saw the Steam page, and in this game you do this and do that, and then you start up the game and you just find this one thing that you really enjoy doing, and whether it's The Sims and you enjoy making a house, or it's GTA and you really like the car racing or stealing or just running from the cops. There's all this sort of emergent. It's not emergent gameplay. It can be emergent gameplay, or emergent gameplay is not really a term. That's for emergent storytelling. But the game that you enjoy, or the games that you enjoy them because you see qualities in those games that are specific to you as a person. And in growing up, I definitely almost every single one of my favorite games growing up, I enjoyed them in a way that wasn't necessarily the ideal way. Diablo 2, for example, I did not have a meta build, and I only played the barbarian. I didn't play online either, so I definitely didn't play that game like anybody else or many other people. Certainly not like the vast majority of fan base that remained and shaped the future of the franchise. GTA 2, I played the hell of a lot, always with cheats on, and would never continue games. You just walk around and murder people and just run around. The Sims 1, I played the heck out of that game, even though I knew how to play it. I always played with cheats and just built houses for days. And obviously I'm not the only person to do it like that. But if the game, take The Sims 1 as an example, when a marketing team picks up a Sims 1 and publishes it, they're not going to advertise the game as be like, hey, in this game you can just put cheats on and you can play with infinite money and just build houses for days. If they do that, what are they even doing? They never do that. But that's the experience of a lot of people playing The Sims, is using the game for their own enjoyment in a way that isn't marketable. But that's the thing, though. You can't expect marketing to tell you what you're going to enjoy about games. This is such a fundamental aspect to avoid the hype cycle. Because when you realize that a game can have potential, and what I was going to say is that's why I hate YouTubers that watch a trailer and be like, oh, this has so much potential, think of the things they could implement, or think all of these functionalities that they could come up with, even though it's a bare bones trailer or whatever. Obviously they're not showing everything, so the possibilities are limitless. Obviously, when the game comes out, it's not a limitless game. The possibilities are very much limited. But before the game comes out, they could do anything. You don't know. But for a YouTuber to do that, and it does happen a lot, man. Especially for like dedicated channels to, racing sims or strategy games, stuff like that. For just to hype unreleased games. It's a lack of responsibility from YouTubers, because they are just, it's not, I sometimes it may be on purpose, because obviously if the viewers are hyped, they get a return. You don't want to tell, oh, this could be good, but maybe it isn't. You want the people excited so they come back and watch your videos. But so the incentives are there. But either way, my point is, you can't expect the marketing teams or anybody really before the game comes out to tell you you're gonna like this game because of this. Because the games you end up liking, you like them for your own reasons, and maybe they match up. Especially, and as I was saying, especially for more curated games like single player or linear games, maybe they match up with the reasons the authors and the marketing team wanted you to enjoy those games. For sure, that's a possibility, and that's fine as well. But it's so often that it isn't. Sometimes it's just because you really love the art style in an unreasonable way, and you just play Don't Starve for hundreds of hours, even though you can't figure out how to get past 10 hours of survival. That's definitely the case for me, because I just enjoy the art style of Don't Starve, and it's a calming thing. Or it's the same for Minecraft. Like, you don't have to play Minecraft correctly to enjoy the game. So if Minecraft 2 ever comes out and they tell you you're going to enjoy Minecraft 2 because now you can really
we were free from the idea of there even being a correct way to play Minecraft, because it was so open-ended.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my favorite version of that game, where it's like, oh no, man, it's just here.
Just do your thing, do what you like, but that's for marketing teams. I assume that's a big challenge, a way bigger challenge, because how are you going to market your game and be in this game? You can do what you like. And there is one thing that you like in here. I don't know what it is. They say the marketing does, but you're gonna like it. And obviously that's not a
I mean, outside of like The Sims or something, self-directed play is the hardest thing to advertise or sell to players at all.
Yeah,
That's why the immersive sim genre is constantly in a cycle of dying again and struggling to ever make successful games, is because they're games about self-directed play instead of just playing the game the way you're supposed to. And that's hard to get people to do, and so people don't even when they do play the games and like the games, they often don't experience them the way that everyone talks about the genre supposedly working. How the percentage of players, myself included, who at the time didn't know immersive sims even as a genre name at the time, like played Deus Ex Human Revolution like it was Mass Effect 1. Oh, you play the linear shooter level, and then you do the talk, and then you talk to someone, and then you play the linear shooter level, and then you talk to someone, like not even knowing to employ these like the wacky shit you can do in like Prey or whatever, because like you're just like, I'm Adam Jensen, I shoot the guys, go to the end of the level, and then I talk to the guy with a radio.
Although
dialogue
in your defense, Human Revolution isn't much of an immersive sim.
It's not great at it, but it also like it's hard to even realize that it's doing anything like that. Like if anything, the semi-open world hub of Mankind Divided does a better job at introducing the idea of it doing any immersive sim type stuff than the entirety of Human Revolution, because then it primes you to self-directing at all. And then when you get to the real levels, you also keep doing that because you're like, oh, but I've been doing this the whole game. Yeah, like I'll stealth over here, see what I can do over there.
Think for immersive sims in particular, people the easiest entry point for most people is just any Bethesda game, really, because of the
I catch flack for that sometimes, but I see Bethesda's model as being like immersive sim light.
Yeah, it is in the sense that people really enjoy stealing all the cutlery from somebody's house.
Yeah,
that's an immersive
discover that you
feature.
can put a bucket on someone's head and then they can't see and stuff like that. That's emergent gameplay. That's systems interacting in an unintended way.
Yeah, and even if it is intended, like just the taking people's stuff, that's revolutionary. It definitely was revolutionary back in Morrowind time.
Yeah, it feels trite at this point, basically, but still, most games don't let you do that kind of thing. Like just run around and grab all the shit. So it does lead to a weird unintended outcome where by the time we get to Fallout 4, people are just like, they're like, we should probably make mechanics about how everyone that plays our games is a fucking hoarder that just compulsively grabs everything that doesn't meet, even though like 90% of it's garbage and there's no real benefit to grabbing most loot.
That's Bethesda's fault. What they should do is they should disincentivize through their interface the stealing of everything.
They
should
do.
Just like
they give you an equip load that makes it actively hard to keep grabbing stuff, and in 5 seconds you're like, hey, some of the stuff's actually worth grabbing, some of the stuff's not. But then you compulsively will still just grab too much stuff. You're like, but what if I need it later, or what if I could sell all this? And it creates like these really frustrating gameplay loops that like it's like. So Bethesda never fixed that. Prey did.
Yeah.
Because Prey found a value for all the different types of debris and loot and put them all into categories that were interesting in an actual compelling progression system that wasn't just Bethesda's stupid base building that was garbage. While also giving you fun ways to play with it, because one, sometimes the things you're picking up are secretly monsters, so you're cautious and a little leery about the very idea of looting everything. Sometimes it's a mimic, but also like there's stuff like there's the recycling grenade and all these cool tricks and like gameplay. Like Prey actually made gameplay about Bethesda's overstuffed garbage looting loop. Like, and they didn't even have to, because that developer's previous games weren't even about doing that. They added Bethesda's like Dishonored wasn't like that. They literally
but it's a sequel to Systems Talk.
But I'm saying they took a lineage of games that they had been making that didn't function like that, then put in Bethesda's overdone loot system to then do it better than anyone has ever done before and actually make it a meaneful part 100%. Of the game, which is the coolest thing about Prey and the game. And there's so many cool things about Prey.
Absolutely.
We're super off topic though.
I also want to point out that Prey does storytelling through its random junk. And one example that's probably the easiest, but it sticks in my mind, is you keep finding, well, not everywhere, but there's at least one section of the station where you keep finding what are they called? Baseball gloves. And one of them you find in a trash can. Baseball gloves, you find them anywhere. It could be in a drawer, it could be just on top of the table. But one of them is in a trash can. And you actually, this is a spoiler, super minor spoiler for Prey, where it's a side quest thing. about a character. So it's an example. But so you find out that there's a bunch of baseball gloves in a space station because there's this baseball player that comes into the space station and gives signed baseball gloves to everybody. And there's this one person that hates that baseball player, and it turns out it's the trash can that's next to the desk of that one person. You know, you find a note just saying, "Oh, I hate this person" or whatever. Hate this baseball player, and that's why they put the junk on the trash can, and it's like storytelling. And there's a bunch of examples like this all throughout the game, and it's so beautiful. Prey is a masterclass. Rest in peace, Austin, Arcane Austin, because they got shuttered.
Yep.
Although all the talent has been gone, but still,
that is the struggle. It's like you want to care about people that made games you like, but the industry is so hostile that even if you like, oh, what's the developer made next? Like if it's been 5 years, like everyone you cared about probably doesn't work there anymore anyway, because.
And most of them may not even work in the industry anymore as well.
Yeah.
Not let alone in another company. They just doing some other stuff.
Like I remember hearing press about like the Rockstar wives back in the day, and that was like part of the contribution to me like quitting and even pursuing the a games industry job. Was I'm like, I'm gonna have a bad life if I try to make games. It's gonna be bad. Anyone who does it is insane, and good for them. But also, I hope things work out.
The saying that I want smaller games made by smaller teams of what how is this Toasted? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's the Sonic meme.
Better paid.
The Sonic meme. Yes,
I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less, and I'm not kidding.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Understanding that as somebody who doesn't understand or doesn't intimately understand the process of making a product like a video game. Hearing that for a gamer may be like, no, give me all the best graphics in bigger games. But that's a lie that the developers and publishers in particular, that's a lie that publishers just exposed or spread all around, is that people want better graphics with bigger games. That's not actually what people want. And that's that people. That's what people like to see in marketing material, but that's not what makes people like video games. And you see that in what are the most played video games. And you don't even have to look at Roblox and Minecraft. You can look at Fortnite, which does have nice graphics, mind you, but it's not a hugely complex game in terms of features. It's still super fun for so many people, right? And all the multiplayer games that are small in terms of complexity, obviously they're very they're big games, right? In the sense of there's a lot of people working behind them, but that's more due to the monetization processes than necessarily the game itself, right?
This conversation just went full circle because I looked up the Sonic meme. I'm like, Sonic game meme, I'm not kidding. And one of the image results is the fucking Tony Stark meme where he's like, oh, you mean this? And the thing behind Tony Stark is Garden of Banban.
Yeah.
But that was a popular misinterpretation of the meme that didn't get the point, which is the point is I want games to reduce their scope and like be made ethically and not mistreat their developers, not just I want games that are bad on purpose or just incompetent and so on. Like experienced developers can make good games while having good lives.
Yeah. We don't need the exploitation to have good art. That's such a nobody's making directly that argument, but it is the implicit consequence of saying that we need to exploit the developers if we want to have big games.
Yeah,
it's the implicit argument.
I have an interesting perspective on this as someone who has worked in the creative industry and like has worked on film and stuff, and like I think especially in gaming, it's like a really complicated space because there is a factor of time that needs to be kind of examined. And as consumers, we never think about the urgency of creation. We only think about the end product that we sit with. And from a creator's perspective, like, I do think that we need to move away from like exploiting developers in our time, and we need to find a better balance. Like games like Baldur's Gate 3 go to show that like you don't You don't need to horribly, work so much overtime that you starve to death and sleep under your desk. Like, that's just bad practice and bad management, and we need to move beyond that. But also, I think a lot of the discussion around crunch and around, for lack of a better word, like the labor positioning of a creative endeavor kind of also doesn't always capture the nuanced reality of creation, which is sometimes you do just have to work a lot. And that's not to say that, that
in
developers,
that's definitely the case.
Yeah, like that's not to say that people should be crunching and that all games should be designed from this perspective, but I do struggle to imagine how some very good art would have been made on time and been commercially successful if people did not pull crazy work days. Like there are days when I was working in film where it was like, we only have 1 week to do this. We are a heavily unionized operation. We have put all of our money exactly where it needs to. We have treated everyone really well. Everyone is here because they want to be here. This next week is going to be hell. It's going to be stressful. We did everything right, and we still just need to work 100-hour weeks. Like there's nothing we can do about it. We absolutely have to, or else this thing does not get made, which I think is a nuanced conversation and is a very true reality of creation. Is that like
the struggle is also that it feeds back into capitalism, where it's like
it does.
You have a timetable because you need to pay rent, because things need to make money. That's the struggle.
Yeah. No. It's I think what Toaster's talking about is that the sort of from a higher up perspective, like you can't just delay your movie. You can't delay your games.
Yes,
sometimes.
Exactly. Well, I was thinking
but this applies to everything. It doesn't apply just to games. Like every industry.
Exactly.
But if you're you're a contractor, a construction contractor, and you have to finish this house in 2 months, where normally it would take you half a year. You're still charging the same money, or maybe you charge even more for finishing it in 2 months. The thing is, there needs to be the structures in place to not allow big companies like Microsoft and like Blizzard and like Ubisoft, which is what they do. And this doesn't just apply to games. It applies to anything with programming in particular, but to games in particular, it applies, where they go through the churn in the last 5 or 6 months and then just fire their programmers.
Yes, exactly. That's where the issue is. And like the question of labor is a very complicated issue, and one that like I think we do a really poor job of talking about. Even people who are like really invested in better labor conditions are really bad about talking about labor, especially in creative spaces, because there is, I think, a major epidemic in the industry of like, and it is all late stage capitalism stuff of like, the CEOs wanting to puff up their pockets and shareholders and blah, blah, blah. Like Ubisoft should not be crunching on games. Like this is just a fact. Like they shouldn't be fucking with people and then cutting people out.
They have a recurring development cycle where they make formulaic games on a pattern and a template. They have no excuse to be fucking it up all the time.
Exactly. And like you should have the thing of that. But then also like when I read about or like using TV shows as an example, right? Like I have worked on productions where it's like, this is a passion project and all of us are here and it's 3 a.m. and we are on set in the freezing fucking rain in Alberta, Canada, like filming this one shot and it's take 200. But then it turns out like, we actually did need to be here for all of those takes in order to make the thing good. And then this contributed to the success and it got us a bunch of awards. And we were finally financially and monetarily rewarded for creating art so that we can now create more art. Like if we didn't do that, if we didn't just button up and do that, it isn't as simple as just saying, go out on another day and do it. Like that momentum is lost. That the whole experience has a timeline and you have to do it. And I think about this, obviously this is not me defending crunch, but like I do wonder how and what a game like The Last of Us 2 would have looked like coming out when it did without them crunching. Like if they delayed that game,
I think
it still wouldn't be out. or like
I think The Last of Us 2 is too big. It's too long for its own story.
Yeah,
it doesn't need to stretch as long as it did. They could have definitely taken less.
I don't know about that. I think that game is pretty much perfect, but I do think that that is like a good example of a constraint where, and again, I'm not saying the crunch was good. I'm saying, how do you deliver this product without that? And the question there becomes, do you want this product? Not, was crunch ultimately necessary? And I think that's a really complicated issue to fall into, because you are working on a timeline there with something like that, where it's like, this needs to get out. It's coming out in the last year of a hardware generation. People are not going to buy this if it is perceived as old. How do we do this? How do we make this happen? It's already been 7 years. People are giving us death threats because it's not out yet. How do we move forward? Well, I guess we're just going to need to button up and do it. I guess we need someone to work on how doors swing for the next 24 hours. And like, again, that's not me defending crunch. That's just saying like, that is the state of how you get to these things. It doesn't always necessarily mean bad product management or like a bigger scope. It sometimes just means
the industry's
we made something
level
that
of fidelity.
Takes time.
It's like its level of fidelity and its goals have backed itself into like an unsustainable corner, so that it literally can't make games the way it sets out to in the time scale and budget that it says it's going to do them.
Yes,
like
and that's an issue.
The projects are just on their face impossible on paper to be delivered the way they say they do, and they just keep doing it. They just keep, and then they just make the workers make up for their mistakes of promising impossible projects, which itself is matching the expectations and demands of these weirdo gamers that like compare two different women's faces, like, oh, here's the Horizon Zero Dawn's character's ear and the Hellblade character's ear. How do these visuals compare? And you're like, man, I would be fine if this looked like the Resident Evil 1 remake. I don't need that many more graphics than that, honestly. I don't fucking care about Aloy's ear fidelity, but the fact that people demand graphics so much leads to this kind of thing, which then feeds back to the original Sonic meme of like, that's the real argument being posed when you talk about like, I want games with worse graphics. You're like, I'm saying like, it's like this fidelity isn't worth the cost. Like making these games the way that we do is an unsustainable and damaging cycle.
I do think that...
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I do think that there is something to say about like the sustainability of fidelity, but I do think that the way that people talk about fidelity is incredibly anti-artistic and like reductive and myopic, because the way that people say when they repeat this, like, I want worse games or, worse looking games with less graphics by more blah, blah, blah people. First things first, they don't. People don't want that, because when you do release a game with worse graphics, they say it looks old and bad and they don't buy it. And then the company that makes it goes out of business. But then also...
No, that's not wanting though.
Granted, they're not the same people.
They're not the same people.
No, that's not, but that's the... I think that's the confusion. It's not... You're confusing the I want this thing, but with the I will buy this thing.
Yes,
those are two different things, and that's why I was talking about marketing and things, because that's the marketing.
I'm not even sure if they're entirely different things either. I think it's just that the one meme going around on Twitter doesn't speak to an actual like marketable demographic. I think that a lot of the people sharing this thing and I don't even share, but I agree with the idea of it. Like, I think a lot of those people do genuinely understand what they're saying and mean that. It's just that they're not necessarily a profitable demographic to market to.
I don't think that they do, though.
Not that
because
anyone does.
At the same time, though, the thing is that the people saying this are like, we need to view art as it is, artistically and beautifully, and we need to understand art. But then these people have the worst media literacy takes of all fucking time and have no idea what constitutes art. They just are rallying against a corporation. It's just posturing, which is fine. But like, you don't see these people celebrating when a mid-tier studio makes a very pretty game using their budget really well. These people are not like, oh wow, a Plague Tale, it looks so good. They're just like, why are games so high def? I like true art, which is made with only pixels and anime. Like, it's stupid. It's a really bad view.
I think that's not like I don't know. That's my perception, but I think a lot of people do celebrate. A lot of those people also do celebrate things like Senua's Sacrifice or
No, I don't think they do, though, because the number one defining feature right now of Senua's Sacrifice, or even Alan Wake 2, is that like these are incredible games that are made by indie studios. Technically, I guess Senua's Sacrifice technically isn't because it's technically published by Microsoft. But this idea that like, oh, we're making higher fidelity, people just complain that their computers can't fucking run them, and they're like, does it need to look like this? Did they need to spend $50,000 on this? Like, are you fucking kidding me?
You have a better view of the audience than I do. So, but my perception is that I don't get that perception, honestly. I think it's easy to confuse different people.
I think that's true. I just think that like when we talk about video game graphics, there is a overwhelming, especially just when it comes to fidelity, there's an overwhelming superiority that comes from this perspective. This goes for indie games in general. I think a lot of people who claim to care a lot about indie games don't actually care about indie games or the actual development of games. They care about what posturing about that development makes them look like. And so you get this position where people are like, I like indie games. I'm superior. AAA games are universally bad, and symptoms of AAA games are good graphics. Who needs good graphics? I'm enlightened. I like games with pixel art because those are made by real artists.
I was gonna say, I was gonna say actually about the pixel art that I prefer a game like Celeste than I do with a game like Senua's Sacrifice from an artistic perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think it's fair to like that more. I'm just saying like, there is no objective value to an art style.
Exactly. You're 100% right. Yeah. I don't want to put, it's a preference kind of thing. It's obviously way more difficult from a manpower perspective to make Senua's Sacrifice.
Absolutely. And that's not saying that making these hyper realistic games is sustainable, because it as of right now in the industry, it really isn't. It requires such a huge amount of money and manpower. And like, obviously, those people are going to be the most vulnerable. The artists that make these things are going to be the most vulnerable because they're going to be the first things cut, as you said, because they're all contractors. Like, that's bad. Yeah. But when we talk about like the subjective experience of art and how, you can make intentional artistic choices that matter, that can be really impactful, having very good graphical fidelity is not an inherently unartistic choice. You can have a lot of graphical fidelity for artistic purposes.
Yeah, and just Alan Wake 2.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like something like Alan Wake 2 isn't worse art because it looks realistic. It might not be to someone's taste, but there is an artistic choice that goes into that, and fidelity doesn't really beget artistic intention. So again, when people say things like, I want worse games, I don't like AAA games, they all just focus on graphics. It's like, yeah, but like what you're just saying is that there's no value in artistic choice here. Like there's no value in the artistic posturing of something that is doing something different than whatever the indie games you like. You can flip that on its head and say the same thing about like Tunic or fucking, whatever pixel art owl boy looking game you want to say. The artistics here are low effort and it takes less time. It's clearly just made for the purposes of appealing to a retro audience. Like the fidelity of graphics is not really the issue. The issue is how much it costs. But when people are saying, I want worse games with worse graphics, they're not actually saying that. They're aesthetically posturing, which is annoying and dilutes that discourse.
Yeah, I I understand where you're coming from. I think to a certain extent, there's different degrees. Degrees may not be the word, but there's different degrees of the stage of detaching from mainstream, from being hooked to mainstream games or to AAA games.
Yeah,
and when you first find indie games,
it feels like a whole new world.
Yeah,
it feels like a true paradigm shift. And I want to be very clear here. I am saying this from the perspective of someone whose game of the year this year is Lorelei and the Laser Eyes.
Yeah, I have a Steam page open for that because it looks amazing.
But it's incredible.
Not from a fidelity standpoint. The art style is awesome. But
yes, and like don't get me wrong. Like I'm not saying that like actually AAA graphics are the best. It's just the level with which people interact with the discourse that they're creating there actually does more harm to that discourse than they think they are correcting. Because it is not right to say, actually, Fidelity is bad as a concept. This is a waste and we shouldn't do it. It's bad to say, why is the industry positioned in such a way that people who labor over creating high fidelity are then the most vulnerable when it comes to like having a sustainable workforce. Like, and that's a bigger discussion, and a discussion that we have in the film industry and have been having and fighting constantly in the film industry, because part of the issue here now is when the film industry realized that the discourse on Twitter happening was like, who cares about all these big SFX spectacle? I want more indie looking movies. The shareholders didn't decide, oh, okay, we're gonna focus less on big spectacle movies. Their solution was, oh, people don't value art. We don't need to pay artists capable of making good high fidelity art good. And that's a problem, because now you get movies like, I mean, people talk about it with like the Marvel films. They're like, wow, their visual effects look really unpolished now, and they're not as good in theaters as they potentially were. They're not as groundbreaking as they were. That's a problem. I want you to know the answer to that isn't because the people who make them can't make good art. Those fucking SFX artists and studios can make amazing art. The reason why they don't is because audiences say, we don't care about this, or positioned that they didn't care about this, made it a marketing argument, and now all of a sudden studios don't want to pay those people to make the level of art that they are capable of. And in order for them to survive, they need to make worse work, more rushed, for lower pay. So when you say, I want uglier games with worse graphics, and I'm not even kidding, and the main takeaway from that from most people, because all they're doing is posturing and parroting, is good graphics equal bad corrupt, you're not actually arguing for higher artistic intent and more diverse artistic depictions in games. You are just enforcing a binary between what people perceive as high effort art and what people perceive as quote unquote more valuable artistic art, which is a huge problem and devalues the work people do when they dedicate themselves to a craft, which is truly upsetting.
Yep. I agree with you.
Yeah. And I take a lot of issues with that particular indie game meme just because it is one of those things where people say they want something, but Colonel, you're completely right. Wanting something and paying for something is really different. And this is where we get to, and it's a little bit, off the topic, but like, one of the things that we found in film and TV marketing is that like heavily engaged online fan bases don't necessarily equate to things being successful. And
it's Morbin time.
Yeah, it's Morbin time. But actually, Morbius was super successful, and people are finally reporting on it, which is interesting. But the thing that I'm thinking of,
Morbius is, I've heard of Morbin time, but not Morbius.
It's bad.
Is it a superhero?
It's a bad superhero Sony movie. We'll talk about it. We can talk about it later.
I've heard of Morbin time, but not Morbius. That really summarizes it, doesn't it?
The thing I'm thinking of specifically with this is animated shows like Infinity Train. Where people online are like, how could HBO cancel this? It's so good, and it has such an active online fan base. We got it trending. Why isn't it renewed? And the answer is, when your entire target audience is incredibly terminally online people who primarily interact with fandom through the piracy of media, it doesn't matter how much they like a thing. It doesn't matter how much they support a thing on Twitter. If it doesn't equal cash, you can't make the thing. And there's a lot in the background of that complicates that discussion. Obviously, CEO payouts, artists not getting paid enough, unrealistic budget expectations. All of that is true. All of that is a problem and needs to get dealt with. But at the end of the day, the creation of art is a cruel calculus. And it either requires sacrifice from an artist under the current conditions, or massive critical success and financial backing. And this has sort of been a fact of art since the very beginning. There was no time in human history where we just purely created for the sake of creation.
You're talking about commercialized art or productified art.
Yes, well, mass media art.
Mass media, yeah.
Yes, mass media. I'm saying in a space where art exists and we are pursuing art for the purpose of art, for the purpose of sharing with an audience, for the purpose of living through art. If you go back to the fucking dark ages, there were still goddamn people needing patrons who financed their lifestyles so that they could work for their art. And I'm not saying
that's a historical bias of our well, it's not just historical, but it's a bias that is created through our own commercialized system and also the history. The vast majority of art isn't high art, and it's still art.
Yes.
And we're talking, back in dark ages, if you want to call them that.
But what I'm saying is, when people talk about art, they aren't talking about making macaroni on plates in their home, in the privacy of their own home, for their own self-enjoyment.
Or their communal singing every Sunday. For
exactly.
Or your Twitter account, basically.
Yes.
Or your Twitter account, exactly. Very true.
When people are talking about and making these big opinions about, for example, video games, they are not realizing that they are discussing something that exists within the confines of commercialization. And honestly, as much as I loathe to admit it, I'm as much of a Marxist as everyone else here. Like, I don't know if we will ever truly see a time when art doesn't at least have some kind of commercial incentive behind it. I don't know if video games would exist if people couldn't get paid to make them. I do think in some sense there are definitely lots of projects that release for free for the passion of it. But again, a lot of this stuff is made through the privilege of having other jobs or having other financial incentives that allow them to do this. I don't really think mass market art in the way that we consume it really does or can exist purely for its own sake, just because the conditions with which the world we live in and the conditions of which the world we will presumably live in until we die. So even if a huge revolution happens, right? So you still need to have this discourse within the shapes. Exactly. Exactly. Right. So you still have to have these conversations within the context of a pragmatic reality, which is like, if you want artistic expression to exist free and unfettered, you need to realize that making broad sweeping statements like high fidelity is bad and unsustainable fundamentally isn't actually accurate. The issue is the rest of the stuff around it, and maybe opening your own horizons and experiencing more things and paying for those things to experience them is probably actually the best way to support good art, and not just propping up bad indie games that aren't actually very good that lead to a decline in the overall quality of output and lower standards. Maybe that's the way to go about things.
I think a more systemic, or maybe for me, the most immediate systemic change that we could see is the downfall of consoles. Because consoles as a publishing mechanism do create a lot of incentives to sort of drive the rush to better graphical fidelity, better, because they're selling machines as well as games, right? And that's why I'm pointing out that if we do drop the consoles as a paradigm, really, because it's not like we're gonna lose the possibility of playing a video game on a little machine. But it doesn't have to be the same kind of it's centralized machine, I think if we see that paradigm shift, it may be better in this particular aspect for developers. But it's a drop in the ocean. It's and the ocean can, or drop in a river, I suppose, and the river flows, and it's not the only thing. There's even with all the changes, we could see things get a lot worse, because it depends on a lot of other things outside of the gaming industry, especially when it comes to things like unionization and workers' rights and things like that.
Yeah.
But that's all the time we have for today.
Just to suffer.
What is a human if not? Wait, what? How does that go?
But punished glass.
That's what it is. Punished glass.
What is sand but tortured? What is glass but tortured sand? Right.
That makes more sense. Actually, now that you say it. Yeah, that actually checks out. Yeah. Is that from Vampire?
That's from Vampire,
yeah.
a AA game that it wasn't super great, but it's funny because it is very emblematic of the exact discussion we're having right now.
It is a video.
Vampire is a weird game.
I thought the writing
was... It's a video I shouldn't make, but I probably will at some point, because I think that game is interesting in how bad it is. I think it is just huge missed opportunities that are clearly telegraphed right in front of it that it just does not engage with. And I'm like, but if I make that video, no one's watching it.
No one's watching it because no one played it.
No one cares about Vampire.
I played it. I loved it.
I liked it too. I think it's not a great game. I think it's a hugely failed experiment.
As a game, it's just sort of meh. But the writing had such banger lines every once in a while. Like,
I genuinely like the "What is glass but tortured sand"
I'm sure it's got some okay dialogue,
line.
And the linear gameplay you do in the mandatory parts is probably fine. But like the actual systems and world that's set up are so bungled, so hard that it hurts me that they had idea. They just didn't. They were too afraid to make a game with any friction, so the game doesn't work on a fundamental level outside of the parts that you just have to play. It's just anyway. Thanks for watching. Like always, guys, this has been Dialog Choices Podcast. Once again, this is not an attack on the developer. In fact, if the developer's watching this prove me wrong, I dare you.
Yeah, make a better game.
Oh no, I'm wrong. Everyone benefits, including me. Damn. Like, I'm not fucking rooting against the game. I would love to be wrong, because then everyone gets a good game and nothing bad happened. So do it. I dare you. See you guys next time.
Bye.